Dear all, good morning, everyone present in this August gathering, and some of you joining us virtually. Since it's a hybrid event, some of the participants would be joining us virtually as well. I'm aware that this might be a little early for some of you present here. Thank you for making this up. I, Purushinder Singh, on behalf of Cuts International, welcome everyone to our first physical workshop of the series Dialogues on Deliverables to Deliveries under the Defense News Conclave, Stories of US India Defense and Security Partnership, which has been supported by the US Department of State through US Consulate General, Kolkata. Thank you everyone for making up. Before we dive into the informative and fruitful panel discussions and commence the day, just setting out some house announcements. Today, there would be two sessions of 1 hour and 30 minutes each. The panel discussion will be for 1 hour and 15 minutes, after which we'll have a Q&A session. So I would encourage to put in your questions. We encourage the members of the panel joining virtually to keep their cameras on during the session and phones off unless you are speaking. I will request the audience members to keep their cell phones on silent mode or aeroplane mode preferably. It is encouraged that audience members pose their questions indicating relevant speakers to make this session even more interactive. Now, there's a slight delay or change in the event and proceedings. We would start by opening remarks by Vipul Chattopadhyay. He's Executive Director, Cuts International, which would be followed immediately by the first panel discussion. That would be from 10 to 11:30. 11:30, we would have keynote address by Colonel Hess from US Army Attaché from US Embassy Delhi, and then we would break out for at 11:45 for tea and coffee networking session, and post which 12 we would have the concluding or the second session, 12 to 1:30. So before further delay, I would like to call upon Vipul Chattopadhyay, Executive Director, Cuts International, for his opening remarks and opening the event.
Thank you, Puru. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Cuts International, I welcome you to this workshop on stories of US-India defense and security partnership. So as Puru said, over the day, half a day, we're going to speak from a number of domain experts on this subject. So in my opening remarks, I will not go into the technicalities of the subject. And we are very grateful to have domain experts like Lieutenant General Saha, Air Chief Marshal Raha, and many others. I'm not taking everybody's name at the moment. They will be introduced. We are very, very grateful to them to help us in this particular project. Before I move on, let me thank the US Consulate General in Kolkata, the US Embassy in New Delhi, and American Center in Kolkata for their support to this program. I'll be very brief in my opening remarks and will speak about 2-3 points, and hopefully they'll be of both relevance and of your interest in the context of this particular project. Before I move on, let me also inform you that we have been implementing this project for more than a year now. We organized a number of webinars so far and produced various other research documents. So this is the first workshop that we are organizing under this project in this month of August. This will be followed by one in Jaipur, then in Mumbai, in Hyderabad, and in Chennai. So all these consular districts of the US Embassy in New Delhi, they will be covered under this project, particularly this series of workshops. Then we are going to conclude the project sometime in February next year with a, I would say, big program, more comprehensive program in New Delhi, where our intention is to generate more interest, do more outreach on an important, maybe slightly dormant at the moment, but becoming more and more important subject of our interest. So let me talk about a bit on why this subject is very, very important for us, not just for cuts, but for India and for the Indo-Pacific region, as well as for the world as at large. Let me take you back, if I may, to 11th May 1998, the day we did our nuclear test. We means India, became almost a pariah in the global stage, except Russia and France, if I remember correctly. Those two P5 countries, sanctions were imposed against us. But the story, I think, started from there. Within just about a year, I remember, and Viran Saha and others, they would recall much more vividly, I may say, that the dialogue between US and India started. Stoke Ralbot, Jaswant Singh ji, they first started talking about it. Then there is a series of phone calls, series of dialogues, series of meetings. And that's where I think the new era of US-India partnership started from there. Why is it so? That is my hypothesis as follows. In 1951, our size of our economy was about $60 billion. It got doubled in 20 years in 1971, around 120, $125 billion. It got doubled again in another 20 years in 1991. Then came the reforms. And by the end of that decade, it was very clear that while earlier India took 2 decades to double its economic size or the size of its economy, it's going to happen within that decade, in half of that time. So the one good thing about the Americans is that they understand market, they understand business. So there is that business, huge business opportunity with this huge population and the increase in population, increase in market size. So that, among other various other factors, including purely defense related, security related factors, that I think brought us together. Then we doubled our income in around 2000, 2001. Then another double took place in 2011. Then another doubling, by the way, in another 10 years. And we are all set to double our size of our economy in just about 5 years. Argue, critique, even criticize, and if not agree, but I understand those things. But I tend to agree more with this recent report, which has been prepared by the Goldman Sachs, that by 2075, the size of our economy is going to surpass that of the United States of America. And not just that, more importantly, it's going to be almost equal to, very close gap with China. So if I look at the World Power Index, which is prepared by very good index, very good methodology, annually by Lowy Institute in Australia, the power gap between India and other major powers, that is also coming down. And that, I think, also explains partnership is growing by the day. So that's one point that I would like to emphasize on in my opening remarks. Then, of course, all these major developments started taking place one by one. Basic partnerships, all 4 basic partnerships. Don't ask me, I don't remember them. I'm not a domain expert. They are there. The civilian nuclear deal is there. It's yet to take off in a big sense, but that's another story. Then came this official state visit of our Prime Minister a couple of months back. And it's not just defense and security matters. We have to look at it much more holistically. Now, India is the only developing country which is a member of Critical Minerals Partnership. India is a member of Artemis Accord. There is this ISET, Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies. So all these have to be taken together. And of course, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity. So all these things have to be taken together. We have to work on them dispassionately to see that how we can take forward our partnership at the next level. And I think it is now going to grow because this is another hypothesis that I have. Unless India is secured, and this is both ways, I think, and Taiwan is secured, then the world security is at a very serious, would be at a very, very serious situation. So what we are now, I think we are now at a stage where we see that we used to say all this, we still say that democracy can deliver. I think we are now going into the next stage where we can start saying that democracy has delivered. And that I think is a major message that is coming out of this partnership. Now, my third and final point, which I would like to place before you, and this maybe slightly controversial, is that there is one school of thought, may not be in our country, but more in the context of the Ukraine war, which is still going on, unfortunately, that by acquiring all these modern equipments, whether by the army or by Air Force or by Navy, are we kind of, taking that experience forward, that even human missiles, they are not that effective on the border. Russia has effectively disabled them. Whereas very simple commercial drone, which we see in our market, with some improvisation, with some innovation, those drones are perhaps much more effective for Ukraine. So this debate between this very modern equipments and this simple technology, this debate, I think, has already started. I'm referring to a very interesting article which appeared in Financial Times a few weeks back. I guess Manu must have read it, with a question mark. Are we seeing a modern Maginot Line or not? I guess most of you, if not all of you, they are aware of the Maginot Line, that how Germany circumvented it by entering France through Luxembourg and then Belgium, avoiding the usual border, France-Germany border. Then Maginot Line became ineffective. And my answer, though it's not, it's a tentative answer. My answer is both, perhaps both no and yes. No, because we have to, optics also play a major role on subject like this. So by acquiring these modern equipments, optics is also very important. At the same time, perhaps yes, and this is where I think we are yet to, there's a lot of things are happening, but that maybe they are not coming out very clearly in the public domain, in the popular media. And that is one of the most important objectives of this program. That I'm sure you know, most of you know, particularly those who are from the media, that other than these major agreements on procurement of equipments, there is also a lot of cooperation which is going on, not just between India and US, but also other countries, particularly Israel is very active in this field, between smaller companies, including defense startups, for innovation. Hmm. And that, I guess, is going to be very, very effective going forward. So the time has not yet come to answer that question. I request our esteemed panelists to deal a bit on this particular aspect of this partnership going forward. So I think this partnership is already quite strong and is going to grow. But another major thing which I would like to talk about and then stop is that this also is already creating, and going forward is going to create more misinformation and disinformation, right? So distorted information, completely misleading information. I'll give you just one example. We are yet to even start negotiating on this Predator drone, if I understand correctly. You just had an MOU, right? But there's this news in the social media, in this age of social media is becoming more and more challenging, that we are buying them at a much higher cost. So Indian Army had to issue a press release to counter that. I think it's more misleading as well as distorted, both mis and disinformation. So my colleague Sucharita, we are doing a lot of work on that subject. Again, with support from US Consulate, Kolkata. She is going to speak about how to detect. So there comes the uh, the importance, the responsibility of the media before writing anything, even in the social media. It's better to check from relevant sources what exactly, and these some of them are very, very technical matters, right? So this is one major objective of this whole project, to arouse interest among our media community, and also to develop their capacity to for better reporting, better understanding of this subject. So with that, let me thank you once again. Once again, I thank US Embassy New Delhi, US Consulate General Kolkata, American Center, and of course my colleagues who have worked, I think, very hard in organizing this program. I see the whole room is full, and there are many more who have joined online. So I'm fairly confident that we are going to have very fruitful discussion over the day, and we are going to learn more, expand our knowledge on a subject which should, and this is, I will conclude with what General Saha told me a few weeks back when I met him for the first time in Delhi, that this subject is becoming more and more important, not just in cities, but also in our tier 2, tier 3 cities, and also in the hinterland. And if I just look at, I did a very, very rough uh, calculation or understanding, I would say, of the profile of students in Rashtriya Raksha University, for example. Many students are actually coming not from metro cities, but from other tier 2, tier 3 cities, even rural hinterland. So that in this interest is growing. And I'm sure that in future, we are going to get more support from US Embassy, US consulates to take this subject forward. Thank you very much. Over to Puru. Yeah, for you have to start the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Bipul Chattopadhyay, for your opening remarks. Uh, it was rightly mentioned that in the aftermath of nuclear tests, 1998, and we are sitting in 2023. So that is exactly 25 years of US-India relations, and how we see the next 25, where India want to become a developed nation by 2047. So look forward to that. Now I would like to start with the session one, and I would like to call upon this stage our chair and moderator, Lieutenant General Subrata Saha, who would then introduce our panelists and start the session. We would just require a minute and a half to organize the table. General Saha he's a former Deputy Chief of Army Staff and a recipient of Param Vashish Seva Medal, YSM Youth Yudh Seva Medal, Vashish Seva Medal. Post-retirement, he was nominated twice as member National Security Advisory Board, founding director School of Defense and Strategic Studies, RRU, and founding DG SIDM. Also, I would like to call upon the other panelists, Shekhar Dutt, who would be joining us virtually. Professor Chintamani Mahapatra, Manu Pabi, and Arun Ramchandani, who would also be joining us virtually. General Saha, the stage is yours, and we open for significance of US-India defense and security partnership.
A very good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I wish to thank the organizers, CUTS International, Vipul Chattopadhyay, the US State Department represented here by the US Embassy, US Consulate here, and the American Center. I'm really delighted that you all have taken up this mission of sensitizing people on this rather complex and cautious relationship. I think Vipul has highlighted that in ample measure because many have defined this as the most defining relationship of this century. Some have called it the most consequential relationship. So one way or the other, I think the significance is very well understood. As we all do realize, United States and India have a very wide-ranging strategic partnership. Why I say wide-ranging? Because somewhere it reflects, I think, common values. It reflects a very strong respect for democratic traditions. And of course, there is strategic convergence and common interests, whether they are in terms of a rule-based international order, whether it is in terms of free flow of commercial traffic, whether it is counterterrorism or countering violent extremism, or for that matter, non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. So just as well that this relationship has taken a very cautious and deliberate trajectory. Go to the next slide, please, Deepmala. As you can see in this slide flashed in front of you, although I have put the starting at 1995, but to be fair, actually, we can go back a little earlier, almost a decade earlier, to the times of Rajiv Gandhi when he was wanting US-India defense technology partnership. It didn't see much light, actually. It's only in 1991 when Lieutenant General who was commanding the US Army Pacific by the name Kik Leiter, he's the one who, after a visit to India, submitted proposals in which he suggested, inter-service cooperation between the three services in India and the four in the US. And he also suggested starting off with some kind of military cooperation to give a beginning to this. Well, eventually it's in 1995, actually, very officially we signed the first agreed minutes of defense relations. That actually marks the beginning of the era, beginning of the new era. And soon after the signature of that agreement, as Vipul mentioned, we had this 1998 nuclear blast. Despite all the heat in Pokhran, the relationship completely froze. And most of you are aware of those famous 18 rounds of Jaswant Singh and Stope Talbot dialogue that finally, brought about that shift in perceptions. And eventually, in 2000, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, he welcomed Bill Clinton. So after that, again, things came back on track, and all sanctions were lifted. And eventually in 2005, we signed the new framework for US-India defense relations for a span of 10 years, really speaking, charting out a pretty ambitious course. But despite that, as I said, deliberate and cautious trajectory, in 2013, we signed the Joint Declaration of Defense Cooperation, in which we achieved the status of what is called the closest ally. So in that sense, closest partnership, sorry, in that sense, it allowed some sort of exchange in terms of technology, in terms of information and so on. But ultimately, it's in 2015 that we renewed this framework of US-India defense relationship. Mr. Shekhar Dutt was the defense secretary that time, and he was quite instrumental in this, so I'm sure he will talk a little more. 2016, between Barack Obama and Prime Minister Modi, they announced India as a major defense partner. This had significance from 2 points of view. One, the fact that it had the backing of the US Congress. So in other words, it had legal, validity. And second, of course, as in all previous such endorsements, it gave us, it elevated the sort of defense and technology trade relationship. Between and around the same time, actually, we also started this DTTI and the renewal of the framework of US-India defense relationship. DTTI has its own story, time permitting. I'll try and touch upon it during Q&A. And finally, we have seen in 2018, when the 2+2 ministerial dialogue came, on both sides, these bureaucratic inadequacies in terms of not talking to each other, MOD and ME on our side, and the State Department and Defense Department on their side, finally, even that was ironed out. And I think this 2+2 has really been instrumental in bringing pace or accelerating the closeness of this relationship. And ultimately, of course, 2023, this is very, very fresh. All of us have seen how we have gone the step further to sign on this initiative for critical and emerging technologies. Although it was announced in May 2022, but I put 2023 because the first NSA's meeting was held in January this year. Why I emphasize this point, if you notice, now this relationship is actually being driven by the National Security Council Secretariat on their side as much as on our side, i.e. directly under the PMO and the President. So that is the significance of what it is. Bipul mentioned about the 4 foundational agreements. They are over there, along with the timelines given on the slide. You can take a look. Essentially, the first one allowed to make sure that you kept each other's information confidential. The second one allowed sharing of military logistics. The third one allowed sharing of the very, very, sort of proprietary cyber, I will say, classified kind of, information sharing. So much so, even in terms of the equipment that we used. Chief Marshal Raha is here. Prior to this signing of the Kolkata, whether it is the C-130, whether it is the other huge Globemaster that we have, or the P-81, we were using them with commercial communication equipment because we had not signed this with the US. So that is the kind of significance that these agreements had, and then BECA to do with sharing of geospatial intelligence and so on. Equally, to support these 4 foundational agreements was these 2, which is the STA, which is the Strategic Trade Authorization, which helps in overcoming export controls, and the next one, that is the ISA, Industrial Security Annex, which permits cooperation between our industries, private sector industries, and the US. So that is the whole trajectory, if you will, and I think it conveys a lot. Okay, go next. Bipul highlighted the economic dimension of this relationship, but we all understand that somewhere, unless and until economics is undergirded by strong security, you can't function. So therefore, it makes sense that we are investing now in this range. So here you see the graph which I tried to put down with information from the Center for International Policy, Security Assistance Monitor. This graph is also quite indicative on how this relationship has developed. So post 2008, if you see, we have had this whole range of military equipment that started coming to India, and now we are slowly moving into the domain of what I would call a technological partnership besides the arms alone. So somewhere, in the middle of all this, as we all understand, is security. And when we talk about security, the core, I think, is the Indo-Pacific, which is giving the strength or giving the inspiration or the drive to this strategic partnership. Go next, please. So this is what our Prime Minister Modi, as recently as June, announced India's vision of the Indo-Pacific. You can just see it over there. Go next. And this is President Biden's vision of Indo-Pacific. They are similar, but they are not same. And I highlight this because this is something which we are still in the process of ironing, I think, between the two countries. Go next. What is driving this? I think what is driving this is the fact that the way China is rising, and I use the word rising because for a long, long time, the US assumed that China's rise will be peaceful. Now this rise is not only in terms of expansionism that we are seeing in the South China Sea, for that matter, coercion of Taiwan, economic coercion of Australia, what we are seeing across the line of actual control for India. So it is literally in every domain, whether it is in politics, whether it is in economics, it's moving very fast. The uncertainty of the bond with Russia as to where is the limit when you call it limitless, and the technology pilferage which China has managed to do from the US. More important, I think, is the vital reserves of critical raw material. Just to put it in perspective, 18 out of the 37 minerals which are relevant to defense applications are concentrated in China. Out of the 37, only 5 are there with US, Australia, and Canada. 14 are concentrated in countries with strong diplomatic and economic relationships to China. And 18 of them, as I said, are with China. So it is not only about the reserves of critical raw material, it is also the refining capacity for raw material. Even those 5 or the others which are there ultimately seem to be getting routed through China for the purposes of further application. So it is a very strong leverage that they have. The US is experiencing the hazards of decoupling from China, so much so we are facing because of our trade dependencies on China. Go next, please. So to come to the end now, because of the time available to me, I have just quoted here what Secretary Lloyd Austin has been highlighting as, or rather has been underscoring, i.e. the centrality of US-India partnership to maintaining peace and security in the Indo-Pacific region. It is not without its challenges. I think from the US perspective on India is most troubling is our dependency on the Russia for arms. We have seen how reluctantly, but eventually US on 18 July last year gave the waiver for Katsap for getting the S-400. The fact of the matter is, if I were to do a joint operation with India or do a joint military exercise with India from the US, fly one of my aircraft which might get into the coverage of a S-400, it is risky stuff. So that is a major cause of concern. How we are going to deal with that is something which the future will tell us. Second, given the fact, the physical proximity of China with India across an unsettled border also raises question mark on how far will India go. We have recently seen India has postponed its participation in the exercise Talisman Sabre of Australia. Initially, we had given positive indications, but now we have said, okay, the next time. And from the Indian perspective on US, this trying to the US trying to balance their relationship with China obviously, puts us on the guard on and off. So that's a tricky one. And so much so is our difference in perception on how US should be dealing with Russia as compared to how they should be dealing with China. So these are issues that will be tricky. And last but not the least, I think from India's point of view, we seem to see the technological relationship, the technological alliance, if I would use, as a futuristic possibility to be at the core of this relationship. But in order to get technological alliance in high-tech domain, you've heard the number of times the Prime Minister spoke about, the quantum computing, artificial intelligence. He used AI for artificial intelligence as much as for America, India. And, all these domains of high-tech, high-performance computing and so on requires very high degree of trust. And how much can you build trust when you want to maintain strategic ambivalence? So on that note, I will stop here and hand over to my very esteemed panelists, to begin with Professor Chintamani, who is a known brain in India on strategic relations. We have had the honor of listening to him as students on various courses, a very highly respected strategic analyst and a very well-known academic. So over to you, sir, for your part.
Namaskar, good morning, General Shah, Bipulji, distinguished people in the audience. Let me at the outset deeply thank CUTS International for giving me an opportunity to interact with so many knowledgeable people on such a tricky but at the same time so significant theme, US-India relationship. Bipulji and General Shah have given you benchmarks of how the relationship has improved. For more than 40 years, I have been watching this relationship between India and the US now. Now, when you see the benchmarks, the way it has slowly improved from 1991 calculator proposal to 1995 agreed minutes on defense cooperation and things like that, it has been a roller coaster ride. It's not a smooth relationship. However, through that ups and downs, through that peaks and valleys, the relationship has gone up and up and up. And General Shah told you the story of how the relationship today is much better than it was ever before. Now, in this story, let me raise a few questions and then try to answer. But more critical questions I expect from the audience, which you can engage after this particular session on Q&A. Number one, how do the Americans perceive India today? They think that India is the most populous country in the world. They think that India is playing an important role in most of the global activities taking place right now. It is a very rich civilization with a great history, and that it has got a critical geography located astride vital sea lanes and energy lanes. It is one of the fastest growing major economies in the world today, that the middle class in India is rising very fast. And then, of course, in India today, we have a very vigorous science and technology sectors. India, unlike in the past, is a nuclear power and a missile power. It is a space power. This is what the Americans look at India today. How did they look at India earlier, after the end of Second World War, when the US emerged as a superpower? There was no concept of superpower before World War II. And at that time, India was a newly born baby as an independent state after centuries of foreign rule. By and large, they looked at India as a country of snake charmers, naked fakirs, and a tremendous amount of demographic burden, not the most populous country in the world. where the largest concentration of illiterates in the world were in India. The largest concentration of poor people were there in India. And that in India, the government is following an economic policy which doesn't gel with their economic philosophy of free enterprise and free trade. And this a kind of socialistic pattern of economy that India is following. So the American business and traders did not have any opening in India. And whatever little they had was very little, very little. And of course, India adopted a foreign policy strategy called non-alignment, which was by and large anti-American. From that kind of perception, just now I told you how they perceive today. What a remarkable change in the story in the evolution of Indo-US relations since 1947 onwards. That is remarkable. And then how did India look at the US at that time? It's an arrogant superpower. It wants to bully everybody else in the world, that it is not a country with high morals and ethical standards and all that. And they are following an economic policy which is not going to benefit the poor people in India. So we cannot have trade and business of the kind on terms and conditions that they impose on India. And that the United States of America is siding with all our enemies and adversaries, whether it is Pakistan or China, and whether the United States, and the USA is interfering in critical domestic issues and very critical core national security issues such as Kashmir and all that. Today, how do we look at the United States? In a slightly different way. It is the only superpower in the world. It has the best of balance and a good combination of economic wherewithal and military firepower and science and technology and innovation areas. They are the number one even now. And that this United States of America is so important that it would be unwise and difficult to maintain a relationship with the rest of the world, either by making the US an enemy or adversary or making a distance from the United States of America. That the US has been a fantastic country where all the aspirants from India, like any other part of the world, went to the US, and today the number is about 4 million, and they're doing so well. Highest average family income group in the US are the Indian Americans. They are sending remittances. They have relationship in India. A kind of social bridge has been established between the two countries. We look at it like this. The United States of America, like it or not, is actually the hub of global education, innovation, and discovery. And that is the place where the students would like to go and study and learn. Some of them come back, some of them stay on, but Indian students do go there. The Indian students in the US today contribute about $7 billion annually to the United States GDP. So then we look at the United States in the post-Cold War setting. One of the important strategic partner of India, the Soviet Union, is no longer there. It is disintegrated like a house of cards and all. And it is a superpower. How best to leverage our relationship with the United States today so that it is win-win for both the sides. And we began all these, I'm underlining this now, we began all these about 6 months before the Soviet Union collapsed in December 1991. It was in June 1991 that we began a mini economic revolution in 1991 when Manmohan Singh ji was the finance minister, economic liberalization opening up. And as Bipulji mentioned, and even General Shah mentioned, that economic opening up sent a different kind of message to the United States of America. This country is no longer going to follow the socialist pattern of society. It has opened up its economy. Its middle class is rising. It's a huge, huge, huge market. And why not go and do business and trade there? So from then on, perception that is happening between the cooperative the United States, the Indo-Pacific, in our vision, is going to be a dangerous place. It's already a dangerous place because of the rise of China, the largest importer in the world, the largest exporter in the world. And the way the economic miracle unfolded in China today, it is almost competing with the United States of America for the top place, may not be in the world, but certainly in Asia, in Indo-Pacific region and all that. Would it be very comfortable for India to live with that kind of China, especially after recent Galwan Valley and other incidents? Especially after the Chinese and the Pakistanis are collaborating in all kinds of bad things, including backing the terrorist elements? It will be difficult. It is important, significant, relevant, and appropriate that India and the US are together in some of the key challenges that is unfolding in Indo-Pacific, a region where we want to play a big role. Recall the World War II, 1943. The guns were barking, the bombs were exploding. Pandit Nehru was in jail. He was writing his pigeon diary where he aspired that India should play an important role in the Asia and the Pacific region. Later, with the evolution of the Cold War, we are not able to do that. All our vision, all our activities, all our engagement got confined to South Asia. But the moment the Cold War ended, again, India adopted a policy of look east because that is an important area. And when Modi ji came to power, he said, why look east? Act east. And from Act East today, we have the Indo-Pacific. And Indo-Pacific is an important area where India can, should, and already is playing a lot of role. So in this region where you have so many nuclear weapon powers, Pakistan, China, North Korea, India, the United States, this is an area which is actually the center of gravity of global political economy today, not European Union. And particularly after Ukraine war, you saw the energy crisis in European Union. We saw what happened to the EU after the British left the European Union. We saw the Eurozone crisis only recently. So an economic model of integration, the European Union, which is evolving, now is under big stress. It is Indo-Pacific, where you have the largest economy in the world and a big presence, the second largest economy in the world, galloping and competing with the United States, the third largest economy in the world, Japan, and the fifth largest economy in the world, India. So this is an important area where India and the US should and can play constructive role for peace, stability, inclusion, and all that. Now, let me conclude in the first round of this discussion by hinting at some difficulties. Relationship is never normal between any two individuals, or in the family, or in the town, or in the cities, or in the country, or among countries. There are difficulties and challenges. One of the things that the Americans look at India today, this is what the Americans look at India. It's a country where the intellectual property is not very safe. They look at India and say the market is still very closed to the American businessmen and traders. We need to do more and open the market. And they say this is an India which is yet again hobnobbing with our not principal, but one of the most important adversary, Russia. And although the Ukraine war is going on, India continues to buy energy from Russia, not cooperating with the United States. And then some of them, particularly in the US Congress and in the media, they say, democracy is under threat in India. This is how they look at it. How do we look at it? We see that the United States even now is interfering in internal affairs of India. What kind of democracy, whether it is backsliding or not, is the US going to tell us? Should not the Americans and those congressmen and senators, and even some of the media fellows, particularly in the New York Times, look at themselves, the state of democracy within the United States? How can we rely on a country which wants to have good defense cooperation with India, and every other day they'll say, your democracy is not working well, you have the CAA, you have the abrogation of Article 370, none of your business. This is what we do. So in matters of defense and security, which is so important, can we sustain such a relationship or improve such a relationship if the political minds are not together, if the economic challenges are very many? That is the question. All said and done, India is no longer the India of 1940s. Today, the Indian companies have invested roughly about $40 billion in the US market, creating 400,000 plus jobs. American companies have invested about $45 billion in India, and they're also creating jobs. You cannot identify a single big American company which has not invested in India. I'll be happy to know if there are any big 5 American companies which have invested in Pakistan. So the situation is really good, but the perception is important. Again, I'll quote General Shah. The optics are equally important. How you look at it. Because if the optics are bad, if the perception is bad, the relationship is not going to be strong that it should be. So we have very many issues here. And how best to resolve those issues and differences? Not by talking among ourselves, but by talking with the Americans, dialoguing with them, which we have been doing, but not adequate. Thank you for your kind attention. Namaste.
Thank you very much, Professor Chintamani. What an illuminating, all-encompassing discourse that you have put out for us. If you recall between what I had shown you in that trajectory and what Professor Chintamani has said, the good news is on both sides, this relationship seems to have bipartisan acceptance, despite this, little pinpricks here and there. Because if you go back to, and I'm relating it to the next speaker, the framework was first signed in 2005 with Pranab Mukherjee as the Defense Minister, Congress. It was given the boost in 15 by Parikar and Carter on the US side. But so really speaking, whether it is the Congress or the Bharatiya Janata Party, or on the other side, whether it is the Democrat or the Republic, you see it's a very sustaining kind of thing with all the ups and downs, as it were. So the next speaker was very, very instrumental in 2005 as the Defense Secretary, but as you all know, he later was the governor of Chhattisgarh. And okay, so we just got the update. We were expecting to hear Mr. Shekhar Dutt. Let me spend one more minute introducing him nonetheless. Mr. Shekhar Dutt was the former governor of Chhattisgarh. He was the Defense Secretary when the framework of this, India-US relationship was signed in 2005, and as I said, with Pranab Mukherjee from our side. So he has a very, very deep insight, and he was telling me how actually more than the Secretary of Defense, even Pentagon, or for that matter, our MOD, actually he says that it is the President George Bush who was literally standing over there and chasing people with a whip that I want this agreement to be signed. And I think the same story applies also to that 123 civil nuclear agreement signed on 18 July 2005. So that way 2005, I think, was a very, very significant year. We are going to miss this interaction with Mr. Shekhar Dutt, unfortunately, because of the internet having been pulled down because of what's happening in Gurugram and thereabouts. So it's very unfortunate. The last line about him, incidentally, he's also a war veteran, a Sena Medal of 1971 war, where he was an artillery OP, taking
Can you hear me, General?
tanks along and entering the area of, if you are familiar with those areas, Naya Chor and so into southern parts of Afghanistan. So unfortunately,
Can you hear me, General? General, can you hear me?
Move forward, we have, I think, let me use just 3 words, the most trusted defense correspondent with us, Manu Papi.
Can you hear
And
me,
I'm saying
General?
it out of experience, I recall on one occasion, I had hardly met him before that. On one occasion, I was commanding 15 Corps in Kashmir. I had not spoken to him. There was no lobbying. But on some incidents there, they took his statement. I mean, it was so mature, not that he was very praising of what we did, but the way he criticized
Can you hear me, General?
Surrounded by the realities of the ground, I picked up my respect for this gentleman that day. And as I said, I think he's one of the most trusted defense correspondent who does not get swayed by one way or the other. So let's listen to Manu on his thoughts from a media perspective of this important relationship. Over to you, Manu.
ठीक है.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much, sir, for the very kind introduction, and thank you to the organizers for organizing this very interesting conference, especially coming now after the visit of the Prime Minister, which I think is perhaps the most significant landmark between India and the US after the civil nuclear deal. This particular visit, which just took place, and I'll explain to you why I think so. But first, I'll just set up my timer so I don't exceed it.
नहीं ये तो अलग ही कुछ है.
You know, I wanted to start my statements here today with something which General Saha just pulled out from me, which was about bipartisan support. And I'll take it a bit further in India. You know, India's biggest problem in the US has been trust. We've seen the 71 war when the US fleet almost entered the war itself. Distrust with the US goes back a long time. But over the past 15-20 years, that has changed, and it has changed so much so that the Manmohan Singh government almost risked getting pulled down by doing a civil nuclear deal when the left parties withdrew support. You know, even a prime minister put his own career and his the future of his party, of his government at risk to ensure that a significant deal or significant contract with the US goes through. This has been taken ahead by the BJP government, the NDA. And what is the primary reason behind us getting close to the Americans now? It is straight away to do with our China challenge. And I would like to talk to you about some practical aspects of why these deals are important, what's the way forward, and why do we really need to nurture and expand this relationship. For a past many years, it's been pretty clear that our traditional tie-ups for security, for technology, for even intelligence have not been working. The fall of Russia has been very clearly marked by the rise of China at the same time. And suddenly we are in a situation where, you know, the access that we have to weapons, to technology, is not adequate enough to take on the Chinese. The Russian technology and offer, unfortunately, hasn't seen infusion of fresh funds for many years. And that has led to a situation where the Chinese are now producing better weapons than the Russians. And if we kept depending on Russia, we would lose out on a larger conflict with the Chinese. Even before we went together on all these agreements with the US, which I want to come to next, the US has been India's largest training partner. Like the most number of exercises that we do, Air Force, Army, Navy, are with the Americans. And that has really expanded our vision of how wars are to be fought. I've covered some of those, and the kind of knowledge that we gain, our troops are gaining, is tremendous, because you are actually seeing how wars will be fought in the future. And as is very clear from the Ukraine-Russia conflict, if you're still fighting in the old way, you will face problems. The Americans have been really able to give Ukraine the technological edge, the intelligence warfare edge to hold off Russia for such a long time. On these agreements that General Saha also referred to, I want to share with you how they are helping us and why do we need them. Everyone will remember the Doklam crisis, when China and India almost came to a war over the Sikkim plateau. And the biggest problem at that time for us was intelligence gathering. Like, what was happening? Who's coming? Is the threat real? How should we counter it? And because of the lack of our own resources of, say, real-time satellite details, and lack of UAVs that agreements that end with the Americans sharing of geospatial information and real-time imagery also between the two militaries. And the Americans could give us the edge by helping us out most data on the Chinese movements far there for us was very important. So we could counter each of their moves, whatever they were bringing in, we could counter them, all of them back. And that led to a stalemate before the Chinese kind of backed off a little bit. So when the Galwan crisis happened, we had signed a further agreement with the Americans in which now we can actually get real-time imagery directly to our armed forces. Like somebody in headquarters can sit down and actually, on demand ask them, can you help us look at what's happening in this particular area of Ladakh? And Americans do have assets everywhere. So it's easier for us to plan how we do stuff. Other agreements which we signed with them, some of them were controversial. I remember back in the day, the defense secretary would have been able to talk better on that, but the end users agreement, I remember, had a lot of political issues, but they all got resolved. But the other agreements that we have signed, which will change how our aircraft talk to each other, how our ships talk to each other, how you can really operate together in the high seas when needed. All of them are basically bringing the two countries' militaries close to each other. Like we will soon be at a stage where we can operate together, and that will be that brings me to the next part of my thing, is that why are we doing all of this? Is again, it is the China challenge, and we have seen from Galwan, we've seen from the Arunachal side of the border that that's going to become more and more relevant, and more so in the maritime domain in the coming days. The Chinese Navy is the largest Navy already in terms of number of ships in the world. They are very, very soon, I would predict in the next 2 to 3 years, will be sending aircraft carrier groups into the Indian Ocean region, which we will have to counter. Their submarines are already, they outnumber us by 4 to 5 times. The gap might increase. And we need all the help that we can get to keep an eye on the Chinese and to counter them in whatever way possible. And the reason, and that is also the reason that, and it's a challenge also, how do we do this? Because the biggest problem we have with the American relationship is still trust. We are building it up, but it's going to take more time. There is nothing which keeps the two countries from not doing more together, for the trust factor. And I think the reason I said that PM's visit was very significant this time is that for the first time we articulated very clearly that we will be jointly developing critical technologies ahead. And there was a small little agreement or talk on manufacturing fighter jet engines. I think that's just the first step. We're going to do more on that because we need to close our technological gap with China. And there is no other partner with the vast resources available to help us than the US. Unfortunately, the US has trust issues with us also. So sharing of technology for them is not easy. So the practical sharing and how it happens in the coming few years will define where we go on that. So I think I'll conclude on that note. And I'm a journalist, so I'm happy at answering questions and like giving speeches. Thank you.
Thank you, Mani. Not only happy answering questions, asking tough questions. So wonderful, coverage. And he went with the, I think, Prime Minister's delegation to both France and the US. So I'll come back to you in the second round. How do you, sort of, if you have to do an interrelationship, how would that work out? So I'm told that Mr. Shekhar Dutt is available online. So, sir, in case you are hearing me, I had the honor of introducing you just a little while back, but nonetheless, very quickly, I repeat again, thank you for joining us, despite all the uncertainties to do with your internet. I hope you have early warning around you so that you're not taken by surprise. Although I know you're multi-storied tower and hopefully you're safe. So here we have Mr. Shekhar Dutt, former governor of Chhattisgarh, the defense secretary at the time of, or rather the backbone of the framework of US-India defense relationship 2005. And of course, a war veteran who was awarded the Sena Medal Gallantry for his actions in 1971. So it's over to you, and we wish to listen to you on how the whole thing evolved, particularly around that, very, very important agreement. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, General. Good morning to everybody. Actually, I have heard very little of the proceedings so far. We have the internet is down because of security reason, communal tensions here, and so somehow my PA has got his own mobile activated, and I am able to communicate or at least listen to just whatever has been said just now. This this dialogue with the US has been extremely useful because it allows both India and USA to take the advantage of each other's presence and willingness. Main thing is willingness to do economic, social, and security partnerships. Willingness to take on, if required, a common adversary, namely China. However, as you must have seen, USA is also trying to make up with China. So it's not just belligerence or shouting at each other. It is also shown that it is willing to make up and bring the affair to normalcy. Failing which, USA is seizing or finding new opportunities and seizing them. So that's the message which is being sent to the Chinese. As far as India is concerned, it is always in US's interest to keep India on their side, share technologies, and share the amount of information which is which they are or their companies are willing to part with. Now, I think a bigger possibility is if Indian companies make joint ventures, become part of the global chain of US companies. This way, each sector would benefit from each other's expertise and the of increasing the partner levels. What I'm saying is one USA, one India need not make two countries. One USA, one India is 11, and therefore seize the opportunities of the world. So USA and India have independent companies which follow the directives of the governments, their governments, but still they are, if they think that world is the target, then many things can be done together, and that is what should be done. We should have joint ventures, indeed joint development because many unknown things are happening, and imagination of both the sides must be made to use, and joint development would result in a new type of equipment, new type of ability, and both India and USA have personnel who are imaginative, who are sensitive to technology and who can indeed give a new direction to technology. So joint production, joint development, and joint ventures. So these should move on. This period of adversarial dialogues with China or USA with Russia, indeed, India had tried, and India will always try to bring about a peace, at least in the form of dialogues with USA and Russia. We have seen that even Ukraine could not be completely pressed down by Russia. Yet, at the end of the year, Ukraine seems quite badly bashed up. There is no point of a sizable population of a country getting bashed up like this, and it benefits nobody. It doesn't benefit Ukraine, doesn't benefit Russia, doesn't benefit Europe. In fact, a whole lot of different problems have arisen out of it, namely, say, food grain shortage, which has been felt acutely by the African countries. Now, peace is required to be brought about, and India is in a position to bring the opposing countries on a table to have a dialogue, separately or together. So, at the same time, India should benefit out of US partnership, and US should benefit out of Indian partnership. That is what I have to say. And thank you very much, General. And thank you all. I wish I was there, but there has been circumstances which has prevented me to star out. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, sir, for giving us this discourse, despite all the uncertainty that you have gone through in the last 3-4 days. And we are really grateful to you for what you have covered. And we look forward to your coming in, hopefully again for the second round. And some nice points you just heard from Mr. Shekhar Dutt. And our next speaker, we have quite coincidentally, because he spoke about partnership, Mr. Shekhar Dutt spoke about partnership, private industries in India and the industries in the US. Frankly speaking, having put in so many years in uniform, one wisdom that I got in my last assignment was this business of economics and business of business. Better to leave it to the industry. They do a better job than anybody can conceive in uniform or as even as a civilian bureaucrat. No matter how much you think you seem to know about everything, the answer is no. Counting the money and getting value out of money is best known by them, so it is best left to them. On that note, luckily we have the next speaker, Arun Ramchandani, who is the Vice President, Larsen and Toubro Defense. I have known him for a while now. A person, I think, who literally has given his whole life to L&T Defense. And L&T Defense, as you know, has given decades of contribution to India's defense. Early on, very quietly, when I say early on, I mean pre-2001, when private sector was not allowed to come and supply directly to defense. So they have worked as subsidiaries of DRDO. They have worked as subsidiaries of many DPS, shown the deep pockets to remain invested. And now, of course, they are both getting returns of investment in terms of money, in terms of the recognition. You have seen Prime Minister Modi has visited their facility in Hazira, where they are making the self-propelled guns. So that is where L&T is today. And we are so lucky to have him. And on this occasion, if you are already listening to me, Arun, on behalf of all of us here, allow me to
And,
wish you a very happy birthday. Today is
Thank you.
so you've already brought smiles on every face over here. So it's over to you, Arun, on your perceptions on the India-US defense relations. How is the private sector taking it? How much hope do you see? You have shown enough patience with the defense of India. Will you show enough patience with the Indo-US framework in terms of the bureaucracies unique to both the countries, the acquisition processes which are complex in both the countries? Are you ready to see through that also? Will L&T see through that also with the same patience? So it's over to you, Arun.
Thank you, General Shah, and good morning to all the distinguished people there on the panel and in the audience. Let me just bring out the industry perspective, and more specifically the defense industry perspective, because we are looking at the US-India defense and security partnership. And let me just say that this partnership has been one of stops and starts. We've seen initiatives coming up, and we've seen initiatives peter out. And I think, of course, at no point in time has the expectation been so high, has the environment been so right for real strong cooperation between the India and the US at the industrial level. So while a lot of industrial engagements did happen, India had a offset regime, and many industries like the Tatas, they had joint ventures with Boeing's and Lockheed Martin's and did production. Actually, there few of the industries here were producing into the commercial aviation market, and we've been part of the global supply chain to that extent. But I would say that as far as defense cooperation is concerned and defense industrial partnership is concerned, the past really hasn't shown much and hasn't had much to offer. I would say the biggest stumbling block has been the US regulations. So, like General Shah said, if we find the Indian bureaucracy cumbersome and hard to get by from an industrial perspective, the US State Department is probably multifold in its complexity and the ease of navigation through them. We've had a lot of challenges with the ITAR regulation, which prevented us from cooperating with US defense industry and participating together on joint programs for the Indian market as well as the international market. The current dialogue looks to break down this kind of barriers, but in the US, the State Department is probably as strong as any political establishment, and we still have to see how much they ease down on the ITAR regulations, which would facilitate the cooperation between industries. Quite typically, when we look to cooperate with the US industry, it all starts with signing the MTR and various regulatory agreements, and that takes so much of time that it becomes impossible to cooperate on on a commercial program. That said, we are quite hopeful that this initiative on critical and emerging technologies, which was announced in May 2022 and officially launched in Jan 23, will help in strengthening the innovation ecosystem of both the countries, drive defense innovation and technology cooperation, help in creating resilient semiconductor supply chains, create space cooperation, bring in STEM talent, and bring in next generation telecommunications. Now, these are areas where today India and US can cooperate on co-development. So far we've always talked about transfer of technology And I have a lot of reservations on what really is transfer of technology in, while it sounds like a fancy term, in reality, it essentially is a transfer of processes, but you really don't get any technology or the ability or the know-how or know-why and the ability to build those kind of products. But in this new generation, critical and emerging technology partnerships, I see a possibility that we can get together and start developing together technologies of the future, which would give us uh, a good stand on really having IPs together and being on an equal footing to build products of the future together. So I think there is certainly a lot of hope. There is today, I mean, I would say that as an industry over the last 15, 20 years, we really didn't look for partnerships in the US. We found it more convenient to look at countries like Israel and France and others to work together and build products here. But today, I think the environment is right. The base has been set, and it remains to be seen that what happens on the ground level, how much of the regulations are eased up, and how well we as industry can partner together. I already see a good number of startups who have started, engaging with the US firms, and they are getting funding from US firms, and they are looking at, taking their products in. So I would say there is some traction. Uh, there is also a lot to be done on reciprocal defense procurement agreements. All said and done, it's not easy for an Indian company to go and set up shop in the US to start selling to the US defense. We really don't have that kind of reciprocity of agreement and security of supply arrangements which the US has with other countries. So I do hope that India gets that kind of a status, and we are able to grow industrial cooperation in these times. Thank you. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you, Arun. I must, on a lighter note, I quote unquote lighter note, I must also accept the way L&T is also very quickly evolving. Why I say this? I like the way you said that, L&T has ventured into cooperation with Israel, France, and others. With your permission, I will expose the others to the people sitting here. That is Russia. L&T has done a lot of good work with Russia, but then by seeing the changing geopolitics, you see how industries are much more agile than the government is. So that it brings me back to my earlier point that some things are better left to industry to negotiate and get value for both the countries. And I think, thank you, Arun, for a wonderful discourse, and your point on reciprocal defense production agreement, I think is a brilliant point, which I think the cuts recommendations can definitely take up and take it forward. So now we have time for the second round. And I'm sure I don't have to tell Professor Chintamani what to speak or not to. But sir, I would like you to just touch upon two thoughts that crossed my mind, because you're the only speaker really out of all of us who spoke about Pakistan in passing. So now the fact of the matter is we have this China-Pakistan nexus, So there is a very different perception of China with an adjunct called Pakistan when we see it as opposed to what the US sees it. For the US, it is at best an irritant. Whereas for us, this combination is bloody potent. Okay, so if you can touch upon that part, one. And the second part, which I would like you to touch upon is the fact is the way China has evolved its defense industrial complex is they have built on a lot of Russian technology, and they have taken it forward by pilfering from here, borrowing from here, buying from there. This is the reality. Okay, now our dependency on Russia, we are also going for S-400. China was, I think, little ahead of us in getting S-400. So how can we actually find a way by which we align ourselves to the future that is in front of us and try to move faster away from the trappings of the past, not trying to affect and become trappings for the future. If you could kindly touch upon these two. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. That's a wonderful, is it working? Yeah. That's a wonderful couple of questions. I'll answer that very briefly and then make a few more statement. On Pakistan, I think the most dangerous country in the world today is Pakistan. The most dangerous, I would say. More dangerous than even China. Why? Because that is a country where fundamentalist forces are so powerful and they have penetrated the Pakistani army so much, so deeply, at least up to the colonel level. And they have the nuclear weapons. So combination of terrorist networks, fundamentalist groups, and even the Pakistani army hobnobbing with them. And they have the nuclear weapon. So whatever happens to Pakistan is going to have so much of turbulence in the. So this is where India and the US will have to come together. The Americans do say that they have kept a very careful eye on the Pakistani nuclear establishment and wherever they have their bombs. We don't know, but I think we should share more information. And if we make it public, please don't write about it. Such things are not to be reported. Such things are to be done rather in a very quiet manner, because then the Pakistanis will raise their similar questions. Who the hell are the Indians to team up with Americans, and etc., etc. China and Pakistan coming together is certainly worrisome because China wants to box India in South Asia. India wants to get out of South Asia. And Pakistan is actually a country that the Chinese are leveraging just to constrain and contain India. So how to break that nexus is a big challenge that our diplomacy should work at and think about it. We should have war games as well. How to break that connectivity. If you recall, after the terrorist attack on 9/11, it was Atal Bihari Vajpayee with open hands said unconditional support to the US in fighting terrorism. The only country that was terrified was Pakistan. And Americans went to Pakistan and not to India for help because Pakistan had very close nexus with the Taliban. They knew the residential addresses of every Taliban leaders. Right? So it is very, very important that think very innovatively about breaking the nexus between China and Pakistan. How to do it, I can't say right now. About the China thing, this is where I'll come to the main point that everybody spoke about, the trust factor. Many Indian analysts, they point this out, that can we trust the Americans? We openly say that and we write it out and we talk about it in our conferences. When I go to the US and talk to them, they raise the questions, can we really trust the Indians? They are with the Iranians, they're with the Russians, and can we trust? Is India going to come on board? On the one hand, if we say that China is a big concern, let us team up together, Indians were the first one to say, we don't believe in any containment strategy. Can we trust them? Then when you come to India, they say, if Chinese and Indians fight again, will the Americans come to our help? So these trust factors are basically because of not so open dialogue, not heart-to-heart dialogue. And that is a key thing that we should, as Indians also, understand. When Americans say that can Indians be trusted, how best to answer them, how best to convince them, we need a separate dialogue on that. Second issue that I wanted to talk about was how close India should go to the US. This is where, again, the government of India, the Ministry of Affairs, even the strategic analysts, professors, all of them, so sentimental about this non-alignment. We don't believe in alliance relationship at all. And if any kind of closeness we show with the Americans, we are going to surrender our strategic autonomy. This is going on. This is being paraded everywhere. I have a different thought on that. I think initially for about 4 decades, what we call non-alignment, I looked at it as strategic distance. from the power blocks. And after the end of the Cold War, and the Soviet Union was no longer a strategic partner of India, and the Americans were still dilly-dallying how close to go to the Indians or not to go to the Indians. At that time, again, Indian strategic analysts, they began to talk about strategic autonomy. Even during the nuclear deal, many people say, oh, we are going to surrender our strategic autonomy if we sign the nuclear deal and all. Now, I would recommend that we should not be attached too much to either strategic distance or to strategic autonomy. I would preface strategic flexibility. Pick and choose to go close to country A or country B, depending on the time and particular issues, and not be too sentimental about strategic autonomy, saying that signing defense agreements with the Americans means we are surrendering our strategic autonomy. We have to think the larger picture, where exactly the threats are, and accordingly we should move. Main thing that Arunji also pointed out and Sekharji also pointed out, and the Americans also argue the same way, the institutional and political hurdles in Indo-US cooperation in the field of defense and security. That means institutions in India are as much responsible as the American institutions, and they are the really roadblocks in collaboration. Of course, attempts have been made by both the sides to somehow loosen all those strictness in our bureaucracy, in our processing, and it has to be from both the sides. Otherwise, we just cannot move ahead. The DTTI initiative itself was an indication that how the Americans were trying to open up and loosen their strict policies and all that. I recall several rounds of 1.5 dialogue, diplomatic dialogue with Americans, not just in India, but in the US and different parts of the world, where the Indian side would say that we sign agreements on transfer of technology, but you guys don't give us at all. Then the American side would say that out of 100 applications, 95, we say just okay. There are other 5 which are really critical. We can't help it. That is the American rules and regulations. What can we do about it? Now the time has come to do something about it faster than otherwise. Now on China issues, I would like to highlight this point. We always keep talking about the big elephant in the room and all. I'll just take 1 minute. You know, the United States has much deeper, much more expansive trade relationship with the US than with India. The US investment in China is several times more than with India. Our Prime Minister went to Washington, DC, and we saw all those ceremonies and statements on Indian television and in India. Very little was highlighted on Anthony Blinken around the same time visiting China. Why did he go there? After that, John Kerry went there. Why did he go there? In between, Janet Allen went there. Why did they go there? There is a talk coming up in US-China relationship. So the big question is how to manage this China factor in Indo-US relationship. That is where, again, the trust factor comes in a very big way. And we have to talk among ourselves also how best to handle that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mahapatra. And you highlighted this point about, strategic autonomy. The point which I'm not trying to answer it, but I leave it open for you to consider. This autonomy is all very well, as long as it is not becoming a justification for ambivalence, or it is not becoming an excuse for indecision. I think that is important. How far you want to push whichever. As I said, time is running out, and I must give the 2 minutes now in the second round. It has been reduced from earlier assigned 5 to 2 minutes. So to Manu, and Manu, my question, if you can kindly touch upon, you have covered the Prime Minister in US, you have covered the Prime Minister in France. So here is yet another very interesting, I won't use the word competitive, but there is a history to the relationship with France, which included even post 1998. There is a future that we are seeing from the France. So how do you see this part playing out, if we can have your first-hand views?
Thank you, sir. So it's very clear that India needs Western help when it comes to technology. I think there's no doubt about that. Despite Make in India and whatever we are doing, we cannot do it without taking technology from somebody. And France was the one which really started off giving us tech, and they are the ones who have more flexibility of sharing technology. So yes, there's going to be competition between France and the US. France has had an early start. For example, on jet engine technology, they are willing to offer 100% TOT or 100% joint development. Americans are still stuck at 85. So we'll have to wait and watch how that space plays. But for India's best interest, you have to play one against the other. So it has to be leveraging our relationship with France and telling the Americans, like, hey, they're doing this, why don't you up your game? And we have to keep both together. And I have no doubt that we will benefit on both sides. It's not going to be, the Americans take it all. It's going to be divided between the two of them. The big advantage the American companies have over French is scale. So they are cheaper in the longer term. They can, if they're making one jet, they can make 100 of them and sell 10 to us. France has a problem with achieving that kind of scale. So we have to take both on board. Very interestingly, between the two visits of the Prime Minister in the US and France, there was, I would say, there was more hype or perception of a hype on the American visit. And that is to do with the Indian diaspora there, and which is lacking with the French. So closeness between the two, as countries, of course, I think the perception is that we are closer and we'll get closer to the Americans in the future. But my ideal scenario for a security partnership will be in the Indo-Pacific, for example, is Quad plus France. So we need to engage more with the French when it comes to not just joint development, but also operations and training.
Thank you, Manu. So now I would imagine Arun is still there online.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, great. So Arun, you made, as I said, some brilliant observations. You just heard this point of view from Manu with respect to France. And now you, as a private sector industry, do exceedingly view, France as deal with the US. I would not bring in Israel because they, according to most of you, they are the easiest to deal with, but not the cheapest, I can tell you. So how do you view this part? And the other question which I had from you, and we will give you a minute extra at the cost of taking liberty, like we have this IDEX, and now we have formed a similar US for our startups to work with them. I think it's called Indus or something. Yeah.
That's
so
right. Indus, yeah.
Is there a possibility of joining IDEX, which is part of the Ministry of Defense, but deliberately they choose to sit outside of the Ministry of Defense, and the Indus? I mean, is it possible to give it a connectivity via the government rather than just keeping it as a private sector, auto-driven thing, which may not succeed because startups don't have the kind of patience or the deep pockets that a large industry like yours have. So over to you, Arun.
Okay, so just taking the two questions, one on the France and versus US kind of collaborative ease and perspective. I would say that historically we have been able to work with the French quite a bit. I mean, there is a lot of work on the submarines that has happened. We built the 6 Scorpions in India, and that is one level of cooperation. We've seen work on the missiles front that has happened with the French, and you have companies like MBDA, etc., who are well entrenched in the Indian ecosystem and working with the industry here, like BDL. So these things are well in place. As far as the US is concerned, we did see, Indian companies supplying in being part of the US supply chain for aerostructures, for example, and some companies have been quite successful in being suppliers into the aerostructure supply chain. But broadly, I would say that deep technical collaboration has still not happened with us, and we are quite hopeful that it will happen. The GE aero engine thing with HL, we have to really see whether it brings a aero engine ecosystem into the country. We've had so many one-off partnership agreements, but we really haven't created an ecosystem in the country as far as that is concerned. Coming to, and I'm hopeful it will happen with cooperation, and I hope that there will be more joint ventures and collaborations with US companies. I also see a lot of opportunity for the startups. I know some of these startups have opened office in the US, and they faced hurdles in doing that, but it just goes to show that the confidence that our startups have in engaging in deep tech and being a part of the deep tech ecosystem. The IDEX and the Indus X, there is certainly a convergence, and the IDEX is bringing a lot of startups to the defense environment, giving them an opportunity to build their products for defense applications. And I do hope that the Indus X, which is a little broader framework, would find the IDEX environment useful, and there could be convergence there. The whole idea is that co-development must happen, new technologies must be built together where Indian companies have a share of the IP rights. Without control on IP rights, you are just a producer and don't really control the value chain. So I'm really looking for this shift to happen, and Indus X and IDEX could be good enablers for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Arun. I think we were assigned 7 minutes for Q&A. We'll manage about 5 minutes. I think another 5 minutes we have. So while you decide your questions, please be brief. Luckily, in the audience today, we have a technology expert from the CDAC. Some of you have met him in the pre-coffee. I just want to ask you a quick question.
General, I have to say something.
Just come back to you in a minute, sir. I was asking you, Vishwajit, how prepared do you think from a CDAC, which is so encompassing in the country, the perspective of our ability to absorb the kind of technologies that we are wanting? Over to you, Vishwajit. Quickly, just a minute, please.
Hello. Yeah. So good morning, all distinguished members and whatever the experts are. I'm Vishusha. I'm from CDAC, Associate Director and Group Head at Security and Strategic Applications. It's good to share some of these things here. Those who know CDAC, I'm just giving a brief because those who know CDAC has been initiated to challenge the technology blockade in terms of supercomputing way back in something around 90s. So now CDAC is an established framework of 13 centers across India, having 4,000 scientific manpower, looking at all advanced aspects from supercomputing to AI to quantum computing and all. So having said this particular background, my association with this particular event here, where I'm glad to share, is that we have been working specially for the defense needs and others for last 5 or 6 years, very closely with DRDO, catering to the large-scale requirement of electronic warfare systems. So having associated over that particular field, we have thought of that with the Atmanirbhar, with making India self-reliance on defense and cyber capability and merging these two, and essentially contributing to the Indian forces and government, having all our expertise in all these technology areas, we are actually initiating another separate wing as a company, specifically to the Northeast, along with one of the reputed institutions of IITs, what especially, so that we do have a much bigger ecosystems. And probably why I'm announcing this here is that since we will be making it catering to our eastern regions and with larger scale up operations, and as different experts has already shared, we need to adapt, co-develop and create a new value ecosystems. And for looking ahead with this particular perspective, it's a very good opportunity for me to be present here and ask specially this particular initiative to facilitate for bringing India into another self-reliance on this, catering to this particular requirement. And we are hopeful of these things. Cybersecurity, CDEC is already working closely with different US agencies and universities. So on this defense and other aspect, this initiative will be very welcome, where we'll be also making another huge contribution into it. And in terms of scalability also, the industrial park where this facility extension can be created will be a good welcome initiative. And industry, private industry participation for large scale productions will be another welcome opportunities, right? So with this initiative, I'm very grateful, and I need people like General Shah sir to be behind us and facilitate us and guide us, making this big dream to realize. So with and other experts also similarly. So from CDEC's point of view, it's my open invitations to all the experts, all other players, and even the private players also, to make this initiative a successful one. Thank you all.
Thank you, Vishwajit. So what we'll do, sir, we will take your questions after this address by the US Defense Attaché. And so you can just hold back your questions. We will continue with that. Over to you, Puru.
Thank you for that adaptability. Now we are fortunate enough to be joined virtually by Colonel Douglas Hess. He's a foreign area officer in the United States Army and serves in India as the US Army Attaché. Prior to coming to India, he served as the US Defense Attaché to Sri Lanka and the Maldives, as well as in a variety of staff assignments at Indo-PACOM, Army headquarters and operational units. If you are able to hear me and join us virtually, we look forward to your keynote address. Colonel Hess.
Hi, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation to speak and for the warm welcome. I apologize I couldn't be there to talk with you all in person, but it is an honor to be able to speak to you all about the US-India defense relationship. As we said in my introduction, I am a foreign area officer in the US Army, and I've been working in and around South Asia for almost 10 years now. I've been here in India for about 2 years. It's amazing to me to see how much the relationship between the US and India has changed over the 10 years that I've been following this. I see the theme for today in the conclave is deliverables to deliveries. But in my discussion, I'd like to take a little bit of a step back and look at the relationship from a wider lens. While deliverables and deliveries are obviously a very important part of the relationship, it's very easy to miss the real progress that we've had if we narrow it down to specific areas of cooperation or individual cases. It's important to recognize the US and India have never been more interconnected, whether through information connected on the internet or through global supply chains. People say one click today sets in motion the world. Certainly, if we look at our relationship from a people standpoint, we're very interconnected. I would wager that virtually everyone in that room has friends or family that reside in the US. And it's no secret that some of our biggest business leaders are Indian American, not to mention our vice president. When I first got to India, I often see articles questioning why the US and India should be partners. But the longer I've been here, it seems to me the only real question is what kind of partners are we going to be? In this modern, globalized, and interconnected economy, the only way for a nation to attain health security, food security, and stability for economic prosperity is to work hand in hand with allies and partners. In the global environment, no sole nation, whether you call it a superpower or not, can securely stand by itself. And the strategy of going it alone, global international order, the Indo-Pacific region has a critical role. As I've said, I spent the last 10 years living in South Asia and the Indo-Pacific, and it's clear when you look towards the future that this region is only going to become more important in global affairs. The region's home to more than half the world's people, nearly 2/3 of the world's largest economies and 7 of the 10 largest militaries. Today, Indo-Pacific nations are to define the very nature of the international order, with implications for countries far beyond the shores of the Indian and Pacific Oceans. A little over a year ago, the White House published the U.S. Indo-Pacific Strategy, highlighting our commitment to work along allies and partners for secure and resilient. The most salient feature of the strategy is we recognize that we cannot accomplish this goal alone. We increasingly see provocative behavior by some actors throughout the region, whether it's in the Taiwan Strait, the South China Sea, or the Swahili Coast, or the borders of India, testing the norms of international conduct. These historic challenges require unprecedented cooperation with like-minded allies and partners who share in the vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific. In this endeavor, the United States is proud to work alongside India's leadership in the South Asia and Indian Ocean region as a driving force of the Quad and other multinational fora as an engine for regional growth and development. India has the largest GDP growth of any major economy with a young population that makes India now the world's largest country. The U.S. is committed to continuing to build our strategic partnership in which the U.S. and India work together at the regional groupings to promote stability in South Asia, collaborate in new domains such as health, space, and cyberspace, and deepen our economic and technology cooperation to contribute to a free and open Indo-Pacific. So getting down to more of what we're focused on here today, an essential part of the strategic partnership is certainly the continued growth of the U.S.-India defense relationship. In 2016, the United States and India became major defense partners, marking a new milestone in India defense cooperation and expanding the range and depth of our defense cooperation. Senior leaders in both the U.S. and India continue to promote our strategic relationship with a vision for peace, security, and prosperity across the Indo-Pacific region. For example, in March 2021, India hosted U.S. Defense Secretary Austin in Delhi, which was part of Secretary Austin's first official trip abroad in the Biden administration. The Secretary was just back in India in this year. It's almost, and I'll go as fast as I can here. In the last 2 years, we had the Secretary of the Navy, the Secretary of the Air Force, the Commander of Indo-Pacific Command several times, the Chief of Staff of the Naval Operations, the Chief of U.S. Special Operations Command, Commander of U.S. Pacific, Commander of U.S. Pacific, Commander of U.S. Pacific, any number of distant sectors, with more still coming, and obviously the G20 summit coming up. All of these people come here and we hold candid discussions on the security challenges we face. We have the opportunities to figure out how to advance the defense cooperation. So together with our Indian partners, we are building greater cooperation, particularly through the Initiative for Critical and Emerging Technologies, ICET. Also, the Defense Technology and Trade Initiative. I know sometimes people think ICET replaced it, did not, still here. Our military exercises, official visits and exchanges, military education and training, and co-development and integration of advanced defense systems and platforms into the Indian Armed Forces. Each of these lines of effort serve to deepen familiarity and interoperability between the U.S. and Indian militaries and contribute to more security and stability in the Indo-Pacific. The past 12 months have been a watershed for the relationship as the United States and India took important steps to further our strategic goals. Coming back to ICET, we established that in January between National Security Advisor Doval and Jake Sullivan in Washington at the White House. And we since followed that up with the development of a bilateral defense industrial cooperation roadmap. And we're working on strengthening the ecosystems through events like INDOSEX, which we were just discussing, and increasing the resiliency of supply chains, cooperation on space and next generation telecommunications, and increasing our research and academic partnerships. We're looking forward to putting this ambitious initiative more into action in the coming months and years. The U.S. defense has demonstrated committed to partnering with industry, with India, to provide high quality, technologically advanced defense equipment and systems that are widely considered the most operationally reliable in the world. The announcement in June that the U.S. and India will co-produce the GE-414 engine is an example of our intent to be more ambitious in what we can do together, building on the success of our past foreign military sales. As you're all aware, the Indian Air Force operates C-130s and C-17s over range of missions, whether it's transporting relief supplies within India or abroad, in evacuating Indian citizens in times of distress. Just in the time I've been here in India, we saw this in 2021. India did the evacuations of Indian, Afghan, Nepalese, and Lebanese nationals from Kabul. In 2022, when your government sent significant humanitarian aid to Turkey following a major earthquake there. And then just earlier this year with the evacuations again in Sudan, India demonstrating its ability to project its power globally as it needs to take care of its citizens and contribute to global security. Indian Navy also operates the Boeing P-8I. I believe you all have the second largest P-8 fleet in the world after us. That provides overwatch of land, sea, and air domains and helps secure India's borders and the Indian Ocean region. There are a growing number of joint ventures and partnerships between the U.S. and Indian defense companies. They're committed to building a strong network of defense in India. Come to the United States as part of our supply chains for our systems. One example of this is the M777 ultralight howitzer. This provides critical and credible fire support for India's forces along the 15,000-kilometer border in the high mountain areas. The components of the M777 are assembled, integrated, and tested right here in India. And the U.S. has been in discussions about possibilities of producing the entire thing in India in the future. Additionally, all fuselages for the Apache helicopter are now produced in Hyderabad as part of a joint venture between Tata Advanced and Boeing. This is the only place in the entire world now where H-64s are being produced. That's for all 16 countries that use them, including the United States. So every Apache the U.S. Army flies from here on out starts its life in India. Over the last year, we've also been busy advancing our military-to-military engagements. Last fall, we completed our special operations exercise, Vajra Prahar, and rolled straight into exercise UWAS, which is India's largest bilateral exercise with any of their foreign partners. In September, we're going to be doing the next round time in Alaska. Round of Tiger Triumph, which is our first joint exercise with all three services. And we're in the planning process to do that again in 2024 to make it bigger than it's been in the past. Earlier this year, so in addition to everything that you saw from press of us bringing the B-1 to Defense Expo, we brought the B-1 and fighter aircraft back to India again for exercise Kill India. And in just a few weeks, we'll have the next Malabar exercise where we have India, Australia, Japan, and the U.S. all exercise our naval forces together, with Australia hosting this year. In addition to the exercises, we have numerous U.S. Army soldiers attending, all the way down to enlisted soldiers attending the Army's low-intensity combat course. We look forward to more cooperative programs for training and professional military education in the future. We welcome dozens of Indian officers to U.S. courses every year. Lastly, we made very significant progress in the last 2 years on implementing our defense enabling arrangements between our countries. The closer partnership from these agreements is already having effects, giving benefits to India, giving access to greater information and more logistical support throughout the Indo-Pacific region. We've used it on many occasions for refueling each other's ships and aircraft, and only going to continue to expand that kind of cooperation. The cooperation in defense technology, military exercises, education exchanges, the integration of advanced defense systems and platforms into the armed forces, and increased information sharing all lead to deeper familiarity and interoperability between the U.S. and Indian militaries. I do not anticipate this is going to slow down as we get to the second half of 2023. We're looking ahead to 24. I tell all the new officers who arrive to New Delhi that it never really does slow down, so they need to just buckle up and hang on. It's going to be a wild ride. The United States and India face many common challenges. Our senior defense and political leaders have regularly stated that the U.S.-India relationship is the most consequential one of the 21st century. Our ambassador has said it very clearly, India will not find a more steadfast and proven partner than the United States. The U.S. supports India's leading role as a net security provider in the wider Indo-Pacific region as we continue to work together to face new and evolving global challenges. This may be a strategic partnership, but is predicated on deep and deepening friendship. Again, despite all this discussion on defense, the relationship is not defined by defense alone. India and the United States have many overlapping interests based on our democratic needs, our incredibly vibrant people-to-people ties. Similarly, we face many common challenges in the 21st century, just as all Indo-Pacific nations face challenges of post-pandemic recovery, sustainable economic growth, and the generational challenges of climate change. We're partnering in food security, health security, and climate security every day. Still, it is through cooperation with like-minded allies and partners we can defend the international order against actors and activities that seek to threaten the norms of international conduct, norms in which India and the United States believe resolutely. As we've seen throughout the 21st century, we rarely know in advance when we're going to face a crisis. Whether that's a health crisis, an environmental crisis, or a physical attack from a conventional or unconventional. Nations cannot wait until the crisis arrives to build partnerships. One cannot serve trust. Cooperation efforts combined with bilateral and multilateral economic, health, and climate initiatives prepare us to be ready to work together when a crisis hits. The US and India are better together. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Hess, for such succinct remarks. There's a loud applause from our audience as well. As you mentioned, it's a very consequential relationship, and we are building upon this. Thank you, Colonel Hess, for your remarks. And now I would go back to our distinguished panelist and the chair. We can quickly have one or two questions, because post which we have tea and coffee breakout. So there we can have a quick question as live interaction also. Quick one or two questions.
Okay, so if you permit, the first hand that went up was Admiral Guho. I'm sorry, sir, that time we had to couldn't give you the opportunity. Can we have your question, please, sir? While the mic goes to him, ladies and gentlemen, he retired as our Flag Officer Commanding in Chief of the Eastern Naval Command. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, General. I have only small two observations. Kicklighter meeting was in 91. I started the Malabar exercise in 92 April, May, when I had the
applause, please. Starting Malabar exercise.
I also started Milan, which was in neighboring countries, in 1995. These are the 2 points I want to make. The point, we started in a small way with Malabar, which has grown in size and shape. But what stood out was willingness at that point in time. Possibly the trigger point was 91. And that really started our outward look rather than being, if I may say, remaining in the tail. 91 also was important for many reasons, not only for India, also for USSR, because I lived in Russia for a year and a half when I brought the guided missile destroyer Kashin class minus Rana. So our cooperation really started in 91 Kicklighter, followed by other activities. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do we have time for one or two more?
One very brief, direct
Okay.
short.
Yes, Brigadier Sanyal.
Diplomatic niceties and off-guarded statements. All the speakers, they talked about the progress made in Indo-US cooperation towards defense preparedness and various facets. I'm looking at it from the other side, the statements made by some important personalities. Barack Obama, the Vice President of USA, talking about India's sensitivities. Similar statements have been made by Indian think tanks and professionals. My question is, with these statements made by like Barack Obama and the Vice President of USA, is it influencing the efforts made to combine Indian-US joint cooperation?
Thank you. I think Professor Mahawatra, you touched upon it in your talk. You may just give a very quick response, please.
If you make a compilation of statements made by American congressmen, senators, and even some of the diplomats, as an analyst, I take it with large pinch of salt, because what is done is more important than what is stated. Sometimes you state something out of frustration or under pressure. When somebody in the US Congress will make a statement on Khalistan, certainly from his constituency, there is some pressure or some reward to make a statement on Khalistan. So they make such statements, and we should not be so sensitive and thin-skinned that because some American congressman said this, how Americans believe like this. No. When Prime Minister Modi was visiting there, of course, there was a big highlight about 7,000 Indian Americans inside the White House, never before. But the people who were outside the White House making all kinds of anti-India statements and anti-government statements, those were not taken seriously by Joe Biden. Joe Biden took it in a totally sophisticated way, and he did not go by what New York Times would say or what some groups in New York will say and all that. That's why we have to separate the statements and the action. However, the point that you made, sir, if an American government official is saying something, who should counter that? It is our government who should counter that, but they don't. I've written about it in Sunday Observer, 1 or 2 articles, particularly related to religious freedom. But from our side, if the think tanks are making long statements, they just ignore. So we have to be very careful who is making the statement and who should counter that. If congressman is saying thing, our MP should also say something.
Thank you. I think you had also heard Nirmala Sitharaman countering Obama. So it's part of the game. Yes, over to you, sir.
So I just want to understand the Indian company perspective, and also the August gathering. What is your perspective about the IP? Now, you mentioned the IP is safe here or it's not safe. That's one question. And then I heard IP rights. Why is critical technology not coming to India? So my question is, when you is the Indian company ready to spend on R&D to develop that IP? That is one. And it may be after developing that R&D and the IP, the government or there is no buyer for that. That may be a situation most of the time. The second is, after you get a critical technology from a foreign company, it will not come for free. It will come for with a huge amount, millions and millions of dollars, because they have used it maybe 30 years to develop it. So will the Indian company will take that in their books, pay taxes for that, even if the final product may not be purchased by the government?
Thank you. Arun, are you there?
Yeah, I am there.
Chandani, are you there?
Yeah, I am there. Am I audible?
Yeah, please. This is your question.
Yeah, sure. So on the question of IP and IP rights, let's be very clear that you asked about whether Indian companies are willing to invest in creation of IP, and the answer is yes. Let's look at it that whatever, even a lot of US technologies which have been developed has been developed by government funding. It is not that defense technologies can be developed purely by industrial investments. Like you rightly said, that a lot of the success rate of IP creation and the commercialization of IP is a big challenge, and it does require support from the government. We are lobbying with the government to create an ecosystem which supports industrial R&D and supports IP creation within the country. So that's point number one. Point number two, on transfer of IP rights, I would say that there is, finally, IP is like your family jewels, and no company likes to transfer IP rights. They are happy to license production, but nobody is willing to transfer IP rights. So acquisition of IP is very rare, difficult, and costly, and may not make commercial sense. So the real way forward is co-development, where you co-create and co-own IP. That should be the way forward. This whole thing about TOT acquiring IP has its a lot of limitations. That's what I would say in answer to your question.
Thank you, Arun. Quick 30 seconds wrap. I don't think we have time for any more questions. Just pardon me for that. We will have a chat during the coffee break. Okay, so people have spoken about multilateral exercises. Nowadays we do 8 bilateral and 15 multilateral exercises with the US. When I was attending the US War College for a year there, my faculty was on field tissue, F-16 pilot from the Marine. This guy in every other session would highlight how he enjoyed, or rather learnt in every trip over here, because he mentioned again and again, with a much lesser technological aircraft, your guys would outsmart us anytime because you can innovate much faster than we do. A point I'm highlighting here that, okay, I do understand more water flows in the stream of relationship from US to India, But nonetheless, even Americans realize that there is a lot which goes from us to them as well. A point, I think, which needs equal sensitization in the US as much as here. And that will help us to become a little more thick-skinned in forging forward like a rhino. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much for putting that.
General Shah, I think Mr. Dutt wants to come in. Mr. Dutt, if you want to come in.
Yeah. I actually, very important observation have been made in regard to Indo-French, although we were talking of Indo-US. Now, I remember the NSA of France telling me that France has always had an independent view despite of being in the NATO. And therefore, French kept on doing what they thought was best and yet maintaining a good level of interaction and interoperability with the US. Now, India has been doing it ever since. One of the first countries with which we started our our bilateral discussion was USA. Immediately after the independence, we heavily interacted with them in our Green Revolution. And then we never considered ourselves to be part of the Eastern Bloc or Western Bloc. We were independent and we successfully negotiated through the Eastern Bloc and back into the Western Bloc. And so we know how to interoperate with different blocks. Second thing is, with the advent of technology, we have a lot of things to give. In fact, joint development or co-development is certainly possible. The only thing is that we should not see for the participation in the whole program, but small, many programs, wherein our industries having that edge should get into a partnership with US in development. I remember we had taken Embraer, and the moment Embraer were to be brought back to India, we had signed the contract. Our chap in Brazil said that Embraer cannot go because there is some point which has been raised by the US partners. And the US partners said that there is a suite which US company had developed, a company in US has developed, and it can't go unless and until we give a no objection, we get a no objection from them. So we had just finished Indo-US framework for defense, in which we were stepping into a strategic partnership mode. So I said, what is this strategic partnership mode? And you have put a stop in acquiring Embraer aircraft. It turned out to be that there was a French company based in USA which had developed this. And so I told the vice chief of the air staff that, okay, we'll negotiate, we'll ask the French. The French company was Thales. I called them the same evening, and they said that no, but this has been developed in USA. So therefore the IPR is that of rests in the US part. Then I called our ambassador in USA, Ronan Sen, and the deputy chief of embassy. And I said, you go to the state government and you go to the right sources and tell that we have signed Indo-US framework for defense relations. These kind of things should not be brought. Next day, the vice chief of the air staff came back and he says that, yes, the US have agreed. Now we have to have a constant dialogue, and we have to understand there are multiple agencies in USA which require to be discussed, and we can get the right decision. It also points out to another thing, that IPR actually rests in the relationship between the joint venture partners. A joint venture partner, maybe in USA, maybe in France, maybe in India, and they discuss, and in the new product which is coming out, they can say that this IPR will be dealt with this company and this procedure. So new development will certainly bring out a new product of which you require IPR to be enforced, and the mode and the method is already there. And Indian companies, small or large, very, very specialized or general, should have multiple partnership of joint development, co-development, joint production with US, French, or other countries, companies which are friendly to us, and we should explore the full panorama of the industrial development. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your remarks. And with this, we conclude this panel discussion. I would like to call upon Deepmala to give the memento. First to our chair and moderator, Lieutenant General Saha, for moderating such a wonderfully and such energetically. Next, I'd like to ask Deepmala to present the memento.
Sorry.
In the meantime, I would ask the participants to kindly submit their survey forms to Mihir, who is sitting at the first table, please. And also a quick coffee break. Before that, Professor Chintamani, thank you, sir, for putting out the Indo-Pacific angle and layouting for the second panel that we have starting in another 5 minutes. Thank you. Third, a renowned senior journalist for putting us on the world map and putting us there. Thank you. Also, I would like to thank Arun Ramchandani ji and Shekhar Dutt ji for their remarks virtually. We come back for after quick coffee and tea break. You can bring in your coffee on the tables and we can start right away the second session. Hello. Now, since we are starting, I would start calling upon the panelists and the chair of the second session. Second session titled Recent Initiatives on US-India Defense and Security Partnership. I will request people at the back to start coming and please be seated. First, I would like to call upon our chair and moderator, Indranil Banerjee, the senior analyst and freelance journalist, to come on the stage and please be seated, sir. Next, I would like to call upon Partha Roy Chaudhary, commercial lead at Lockheed Martin, India. Now, I would like to request Air Chief Marshal Arup Raha. Sir, if you could kindly come on the stage. He has been former Chief of Air Staff and President, CENERS, Kolkata. Next, I would like to call upon Colonel Banjinder Singh. He is Director, Aerospace and Defense, USISPF, US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, India Office. And last but not the least, Sucharita Bhattacharjee. She is Policy Analyst at CUTS International. Our moderator and chair, I would request you to kindly take the reins of this workshop. Yes, sir.
Just speak from here itself. So a very quick and brief introduction. I think most of you would rather hear the speakers than me babbling away. So just a couple of points that I'd like to make. First is that at the strategic level, I think there's a broad agreement in this country that we need to engage more deeply with the United States. I don't think there's any major tension on it. Well, except an important point, Mahapatro, which we really need to look at, and that is the United States continuing engagement with China and a little bit of uncertainty in this country about what kind of relationship the United States wishes to have with China, and whether the relationship at the strategic level with India is a lot of messaging that is being made with China in mind. So I think that is one area of our strategic relationship that we need to be aware of. But it's even more important to look at the specifics. And I don't think that we look at the specifics of the relationship, particularly in terms of defense cooperation and the various aspects of this relationship. And I don't think there is enough in the media, despite the wonderful efforts of journalists like Manu Pabbi, who I think has played a very fine role in highlighting some of these issues. But I think there needs to be a lot more discussion. So in that respect, this workshop by CUTS is a very welcome development. And I think we need to have more of that, and we need to have more of this kind of thing in the media. And not just in the media, which is based in Delhi. I've been in Delhi for the last 30 plus years, and I see a lot of this discussion and deliberations on military issues, on strategic issues confined to Delhi. And even when I ran a think tank way back in the 10 years ago, for 15 years, I ran a think tank called SAPRA India Foundation in New Delhi. And I was always trying to get funding to take the debate away from Delhi to places like Hyderabad, Bangalore, Pune, Kolkata, you know, where there are people with, they're thinking people, and they need to get into this dialogue, they need to get into this debate, and they need to voice, you know, their thoughts on what a national policy on these issues should be. It shouldn't be confined to a group of people sitting in Delhi. Even today, when I'm invited to some of these seminars and workshops in Delhi on strategic and military issues, I find the same people there who've been there for the last 20 years, and frankly, with basically the same ideas and mindsets. So we need to move beyond that and you know, get into this new era, and things are changing so fast in this world. We need to be aware of what are the changes taking place. We need to have a ear on the ground, and we need to know much more about what is happening. And there, I think this discussion, this workshop is going to play a good role. With that, let me just ask the speakers to start with Chief Marshal, who needs no introduction. He's been in the media, he's been in the limelight, and we've read a lot of what he's been saying. And it's a real pleasure to hear him in person today. So, Marshal, if you could, yeah, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My special greetings to the chair and my esteemed co-panelists. I am going to speak on air exercises conducted between Indian Air Force and the US Air Force, and its implication and its effect in the region and for the two countries as such. Well, the Indian Air Force in the last 20 years or so, starting from about 2004, has conducted nearly 30 exercises, air exercises, involving more than 25 countries. And these exercises involved the best of the air forces, most professional, most developed, most up-to-date air forces of various countries of the world, both bilateral and multilateral exercises. I'll just list a few for your information. We conduct exercise Syndex with Singapore Air Force, not because they are very important, but they come to India every year. They park themselves with the F-16s and other aircraft at a base in West Bengal, Kalaikunda, next to Kharagpur. They train there in air exercises and air campaigns for more than a month at a time, using our range at Dutkundi to carry out air-to-ground weaponry, as also fly various missions in terms of air campaigns with our forces, and we learn from each other. You know, Singapore has very little airspace, so the Air Force has no scope for training in that airspace. We also do bilateral exercises with many other countries like France, called Exercise Garuda, Exercise Indradhanush with Royal Air Force, UK, with Exercise Pitch Black with Australia, Exercise, Avia Indra with Russian Air Force, then Exercise Desert Storm with UAE, as also Exercise Eastern Bridge with Oman and many other countries. But the exercises that you conduct, the Indian Air Force conducts with US Air Force, bilaterally and multilaterally, has a strategic and geopolitical history. I think that is what we need to know. We learned a lot about geopolitics, geoeconomics, and geostrategy from various speakers earlier. You see, immediately after the Second World War, I'm going to tell some stories. So you'll have to give me some more time, otherwise the stories will remain unfinished. Accordingly, okay. But I'll not take more than 2 minutes additional. So post-World War II, the American authorities, especially the most powerful organization, the US, the State Department, passed a diktat to other countries in the world that you're with us or you're against us. What it meant was that other countries had to join the military alliances like the NATO, CENTO, and SEATO, Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, to be their friends and get all the largesse in terms of weapon systems for the military to be capable, as also funding. After independence, in 1947, India really did not pay heed to this diktat of the US. So it went on to join the NAM and became one of the leaders. This was not liked by the US. I think it was John Foster Dulles, who was the state secretary. I may be wrong, but this is my guess. And they felt that India was trying to get closer to the socialist world led by the Soviet Union. So our relations were very cold. But then in 1962, the debacle we faced in the Indo-China conflict, the Americans realized that if they wanted to contain communist China, because they are in an ideological war with Soviet Union and the communist world and the socialist world, then China was another important factor. So they actually came forward to help Indian armed forces in a big way, and India as such overall. So exercises started in full earnest between the two air forces, Indian Air Force and the US Air Force. At that time, they actually deployed a lot of equipment for ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. They gave us very capable GCI, ground control interception radar and surveillance radar in the form of Star Sapphire. These radars are deployed all along the eastern and northeastern region of the country. Of course, they're all outdated now, but they did serve a very good purpose after the 1962. So a real exercise started in 1963 called Exercise Shiksha. In this exercise, the American Air Force deployed F-100 Super Sabres, better than the Sabres, armed with Sidewinder missiles. The Americans said that we need to do some exercise to check out your air defense efficacy and capability to protect your capital like Delhi, important cities like Bombay, Calcutta, and some important air bases. So they conducted an exercise, the Indian participating in it, on the strike aircraft, which simulated raids over Delhi to check out our air defense system, were the Canberras which got airborne from Agra. And these aircraft are escorted by the 100 super savers for their protection against IAF's air defense aircraft, not truly air defense aircraft, like the Hunter and the NAT aircraft, which are deployed, close to Delhi or within Delhi itself. So when these aircraft got airborne from Agra and came closer, these were detected by our ground control and surveillance radars, and Indian aircraft like Nats and Hunters were scrambled from the bases that they operated in Delhi region. The response is very good. The Nat could scramble in a minute plus. The Hunters could scramble in less than 2 minutes. So when this performance of our air defense capability was exposed to the American pilots, they're totally surprised. But this is exceptional capability you've got. So after scrambling, these aircraft actually climbed to 30,000 feet in no time. Under the guidance of the ground control interception radar, they intercepted this raid well short of the on outskirts of Delhi. They intercepted, engaged in air combat, and they landed back. During the debrief, certain facts came out. Let me tell you the story I got from senior veterans, because I myself was in Kalaikunda in 1975 and lived in the camp. It's called a Shiksha camp, the buildings that are prepared for the Americans to station there for various exercises. The story goes like this. At the end of the mission, the fighter pilots from Nats and Hunters produced a cinefilm of the gun sight, having tracked the American F-100s for a gunshot claim. They produced the film. The Americans said, no, this is not okay. No, this is to be disregarded because we have already shot you off the air with our Sidewinder missiles. So there was some contestation. The Indians wanted to see the film of your shots that you have taken, but they couldn't really produce the films. So these contestations go on in combat, in sports field, everywhere. So it is quite natural. But the lessons we learned, the Indian Air Force, is that missile in air-to-air combat is an important factor, and we need to acquire them with fighter aircraft, with AI radars, airborne interception radar, not artificial intelligence, and of course, the missiles, like the Sidewinders. So that was a very important lesson for us. But the Americans also learned that you may not get a missile solution that easily in combat. So you'll have to rely on the gunshots in a dogfight. Okay. After that, in 1965, you learned about what happened. The Pakistanis joined SEATO, CENTO, and all the treaties the Americans had propagated. And they were in the good books. They got a lot of equipment in terms of warfighting equipment. The of course, the F-16 they got later on. They had the F-104s in between 65 and 71. And of course, they had the sabers. So this war started by Pakistan thinking that India was low in morale because they had lost the 1962 conflict and they had better equipment with them, which the Americans had supplied. So as the war broke out, Americans clamped down. They prevented export of any equipment or armament or fighting equipment to any of the countries, and the exercise also stopped. And of course, in 1971, you heard that we are threatened and we are about to get into war with the US itself over Bangladesh. 1998, of course, another story because of the nuclear device explosion in the month of May. Sanctions were imposed on India, led by the Americans, and we became a pariah. So relations remained very cold during the entire Cold War period, as also till about 2004. After about 40 years, the relations were revived for various reasons. To my mind, it is my estimation and my perception, the factors that counted toward this improvement in relationship in 2004-5 is the demise of Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact in Europe. The 9/11 terrorist attack on the Twin Towers in New York, because India itself was a victim of terrorism sponsored by states across the borders. And India joined the global war on terror, GWOT, espoused by the Americans. And more importantly, as was mentioned by others, the Chinese threat was looming large. Not only economically, they have become very strong, but they are trying to outdo the Americans in military affairs as well. So the Americans felt that this is the time to build up the Indian capability in terms of comprehensive national power and military power as a bulwark against the Chinese growth and belligerence. So a number of exercises started thereafter. In 2004, the first exercise that was started with the US Air Force is called the Cope Thunder. The series continues. We had first exercise in Gwalior, second and third in 2005 and 6 also in Gwalior, thereafter 2009 in Agra, and 2018 in Kalaikunda, and 2023. We just finished the last exercise, the 6th edition of this Cope India in Kalaikunda, Panagarh, and Agra. It was for 2 weeks. It was a very useful exercise. And Indian side, aircraft that participated, as I know, is the LCA Tejas, Sukhoi 30s, Jaguars 17s, the heavy lift aircraft, and C-13 special operations aircraft. The Americans are very happy to fly against the Sukhoi 30 for obvious reasons. And from their side, they had put, for the first time to my mind, the F-15 air superiority fighter, the Eagle. And also they brought in B-1B supersonic strategic bomber. And the Japanese air self-defense forces had observers during this exercise. You may ask me, why did the B-1B strategic bombers come? What role did they have to play in this? I really do not know, but I'll make a guesswork. It is my guess that it was more for strategic, signaling to the neighborhood adversaries. So at the end of this exercise, of course, in between, we also were invited to participate in various exercises in the US itself. The red flag exercise is very famous, flown in Nevada, Nellis base, where the best air forces participate. It is the most important and useful exercise conducted multilaterally almost every 2-3 years. Indian Air Force did exceptionally well in this exercise. Then we are invited to fly a similar exercise called Cope Thunder in Alaska in 2016. 8 fighter aircraft, Sukhoi 30s and Jaguars flew across with 8 halts to reach the other end of the world in Alaska in frozen conditions. And it was supported by C-17, heavy lift transport support, as also air-to-air refueling. So there are many lessons we learned from these exercises. First of all, interoperability. We learned how to manage the logistics, how to manage the networks of each other, maintenance activities, and of course, doing tactical exercises, which would give us a lot of insight into each other's capabilities, as also confidence in ourselves. We learned a lot and imbibed the best practices of all the air forces, especially the USAF. We interacted with them and understood their strategies and tactics. The friendship, the camaraderie, all cemented this bonding in military matters. And I can tell you that military diplomacy is a very important pillar of total diplomacy of a nation. Without having a strong military diplomacy component, a pillar, I don't think relationship between two countries can be cemented and be strong. The other point is that because of the exercises over such a long period, we learned the need to induct fighter aircraft with air interception radar, as also the missiles, close combat missiles, and then it went on to beyond visual range, long range missiles. As also induction of force enhancers like AWACS, AWC, and flight refueling aircraft to enhance the overall performance in the environment. Because an environment, if it is good, could actually make even the less capable aircraft like MiG-21, like that of a F-16 or a Mirage 2000. So the environment is very important. And that's how we have got all these aircraft now. And also network-centric warfare. We learned from them that network-centric warfare is extremely important for the overall capability of any air force. And that's how the Indian Air Force has got the ISCCS, Integrated Air Command and Control System, which actually covers the entire subcontinent as also island territories, integrating all the sensors and radars. And you have a real-time picture of what is happening in the airspace, including the feed from the AWACS, AWC, and other airborne equipment and operational data link. So these are the things we gain from doing exercises with not only the US Air Force, but others as well. I finished my first part. Sorry if I've gone over. Yeah, thank you. Second, you want me to cover now? If you want, I can cover it, no problem.
Perhaps later.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now, now Colonel Baljinder Singh on a very important, the nitty-gritties of actual cooperation and how we can move ahead.
Thank you, Indra. Am I audible? Yeah, thank you so much. Admiral Guha, General Saha, Air Marshal Raha, and esteemed panelists here, and other luminaries who are joining us from the virtually on the through the web, and dear colleagues who are present in the hall. Let me first thank CUTS International for inviting me to share my thought process on the Indo-US relations, and for the wonderful arrangement they made for us. I shall cover my opinions on ISET. What are the opportunities that ISET gave us? And I would like to also cover certain defense exports to US or US defense exports. What and how are they significant to the entire defense ecosystem? But prior to that, let me just introduce the association that I come from. So I am a director of aerospace and defense with US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. It is a bipartisan initiative of our leaders, both from the public and the private sector, working in both the countries, who have a shared vision of strengthening the Indo-US relationships. USISPF has been a trusted partner for the business houses, for the non-governmental organizations, and for the federal and state governments in both the countries. We today have around 400 companies who are our members, both from India and US, and are contributing to the common objective of strengthening both political and business relations between these countries. And just to name a few, John Chambers, who was the erstwhile CEO and chairman of Cisco, who's now running his own JC2 Ventures for investing in the startups from America. We had Indra Nui, the erstwhile CEO of ICICI Bank. We had, Coke, and then we had Ajay Banga, who's heading the World Bank now, and Honorable Minister Jay Shankar, who was on a board prior to taking over the appointment of the External Affairs. So USISPF has been working up front and also backdoor between US and India on certain key issues. I'll just highlight a few issues. One was CATSA, where a few, I would say a year or 2 years back, there was a lot of hue and cry on sanctions that would be levied on India in case we go in for purchases of S-400. A lot of representation and discussions were made with the representatives and the Senate there to make them understand what will be the dent that will come in the Indo-US relations and how India will be badly affected. And very generously and I would say strategically, US has handled the affair, the CATSA incident. The waiver that CATSA waiver has only been passed at the House of Representatives as yet. It has to be still tabled at the Senate and has to be passed. So when it comes in the media that it has been passed, the waivers have been given, it has not been given as yet. It is still there are a few more steps that are lying, but this entire incident has taken a low step and nobody is talking about it as of now. Other than that, we have been able to tell US, also discuss with US that selling arms in our neighborhood is going to create a very bad influence and a strategically disabled region. It will disable the region. And we harp on the principle that a stable and a powerful India is good for the regional stability, and economically strong India is good for US and for the world at large. We've been promoting manufacturing in India because we have a very dedicated skill set level human resource. Where we lack is the technology, and for that we look forward to partnering with the US and to further what the Prime Minister Modi says is the make in India and make for world. So we are trying to partner, bridge this gap between what is being said and what is being done on ground. We had also had the privilege of hosting the Prime Minister during his visit to the US last month or in June, I would say, at the Kennedy Center when we had the business interactions there. And presently we are working very closely with IDEX and the Defense Innovation Organization to have a collaborative work between the startups in India and startup in US, and have a defense innovation ecosystem coming up, and see how we can collaborate in more than one ways, which is beneficial to both countries and the startups. A bit about Indo-US relations, which I will not cover, what already the speakers have covered a lot about it. So today, India and US are enjoying the most strategical global partnership, which has come up over the years, and this is covering all human endeavors, and which is driven by our shared mutual interests on very large number of issues and democratic values. And most important is the vibrant people-to-people contacts. We have 4.5 million Indo-Americans there who are contributing to the US economy in more than many ways. Numerous high-level exchanges have take place between the US government and India, and regular interactions between our leaders are taking place. And just for the information of the participants here and the members here, I would like to highlight a few mechanisms. We have the Indo-US Trade Forum policy, which discusses the direct access to market access and trade-related issues. We have the Indo-US Commercial Dialogue, which focuses on cooperation on standards, ease of doing business, travel, tourism, and it is handled by the Commerce Department in US. On the sidelines of the commerce dialogue, we have the Indo-US CEO Forum, which is again the CEOs of both India and US. They sit and see in case they can make a business case, of some things. So this year it was held in March. Again, a good forum to join. We also had joint working groups in the information and communication technology working to bring cooperation in IT and communication. And lastly, we have the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, where we have a lot of, there were 4 pillars, out of which only India is having a problem in the trade pillar, primarily because of issues which are surrounding our digital economy, the kind of regulations and environment we have of labor and environment standards here. And this needs to be, finally consolidated between India and US before that 4th pillar is signed between the two. Now, going forward to this, and I would just remind Indranil to just tell me about the time, because that is one issue. Okay, so I'll come back and cover this aspect of ISET in the second round.
Thank you, Colonel. That was a very good overview of what is happening in the commercial side, especially in defense. I hope in the second section you'll give us a few success stories. We all like to hear success stories and specifics rather than generalities. So with that, I welcome Mr. Roy Chaudhary, who's had a pretty checkered career, and he's seen a lot of aspects of life, and I'm sure he will be able to tell us a few success stories in this wonderful endeavor that we have embarked upon.
Thank you, sir. So first of all, thank you, Kurtz, for giving me the opportunity to tell story to the storyteller themselves. So that's very unique. Thank you so much. August, the gathering here, dignitaries, thank you so much to give the opportunity to speak and make you feel what our perspective is from American company. So, Puru, can I have the presentation, please? So let me show you, rather than speaking, what we have done so far. We have heard a lot of guests speaking about a lot of aspects. Maybe when I show you, next slide, please. So this is, okay, this slide, these are the equipment that we manufacture. Each one of them is very, very special. Can you go back, please? Go back to the first slide. Yeah. So each one of them is very, very special. It takes years and years and years of R&D. When we're talking about IP, I mean, this is IP. It fails. If it fails, it can cost you your life. Very, very important. These are not something which you build just like that. And also, you need a market and a customer for that. Next slide, please. 30 years of partnership. I'll not go in detail. I have a short time. Next slide, please. This is the manufacturing plant that came up from a cornfield in Hyderabad. 2009. This particular center was stood up because we wanted to make one of the aircraft empennages. The empennage is the tail part of the aircraft. Now, people may think it's easy. It's not easy. There are thousands and thousands of parts in that particular tail part of the aircraft. And when we started here, most of it was made in the US. We tried our luck, I should say, to come here in India and start manufacturing them with Tatas. Tata get their we were the first company where Tata did a joint venture with. They had their first-hand experience of what is aerospace and defense manufacturing. So this is what you see here. And then we had a couple of, if you see the corner right-hand photograph where there's a whole assembly line there, this is something which is state of art. It's the same in the US as well. What do you see here? Absolutely same in US. And just one more point here quickly. This is the only empennage manufacturing facility of C-130J in the world. We don't have a replicated one that whatever, okay, we'll open another one assembly line. If you stop this, our manufacturing of C-130J stops. That is the trust. The word trust came again and again. That is the trust we have in India. And that is still ongoing. I think that is fulfilled. So coming back to the answer of the trust here. Coming to the brownfield expansion, once we set up this, we started with metal to metal bonding. We started with special processes. And these are one state of art, very, very technical, but very state of art capabilities that we have entrusted to set up here in India. Next slide, please. Obviously, nothing, no brainer. To build this up, we need skills. We need a lot of skill development, a lot of trainings, which is not recognized by the government of India through any policies that is present here. So sorry to say that. Please start recognizing the skill development among people, among engineers, among everybody. And on this, we have developed women aerospace and defense skills with a woman who were there in the village. They never knew how to read English. Just imagine how many classes. And today we have given them laptops, each one of them, to develop, and they're far better than men. Sorry to say that. Next slide, please. This is the over the timelines. I don't want to go again and again with the timelines here, 2010 to 2017, various milestones that we have achieved. And we are now making the fighter wings in the same facility. It is very, very important. The fighter wings, other than HAL, none of the private companies in India make any fighter wing. Now, Tata do make fighter wings in this country. And it is a very, very complex machinery. You'll not believe me. It is very hard. When you think that you can bend a tube, You cannot bend the tube. You cannot bend the tube. It's not that you bend the tube with your hand and fit it. Try it with your car. Come back to us for the aircraft. Next slide, please. Here are the capabilities that we have. If you see this, this is not America. This is Hyderabad, India. The assembly line is state of art. Match it with anyone. Go back to industry. See what we have done. Next slide, please. I think this is highly technical. This is one of the, you're talking about IP, joint development, co-development. We heard that. This is a joint developed, co-developed composite bulk fuel tank developed by Tata and Lockheed together. This is roll on, roll off, 5,000 gallons, taken out fuel anywhere in the country. This is one of the, what are the stories we were listening? I wanted to show you what we did. And this is the autoclave here on the side. That's for the composite manufacturing. That's the autoclave on the left-hand side, the blue tank that you see. That's not the real tank. Next slide, please. I wanted to put some photographs of the tank with others, but this is another success story is the Tata Sikorsky plant. So today you can be proud of two things quickly. One, any C-130J aircraft with a rotor wing that you see in the sky, you can always say the tail is made in India. Do you know this? You can always tell that. 200 tails already made in the flying. Coming to the Sikorsky plant, any S-92 that you see, 157 S-92, the whole cabin is made in India, the whole cabin. So you can always say, any S-92 you see, proudly say that that is made in India to anybody. Next slide, please. This is the capability of Tata Sikorsky. Again, I don't want to go into the detail, but we are thinking of really pushing into how much of indigenization we can do here. And that is absolutely more than 90%. Next slide, please. So I don't want to get into the parts. So making this empanages, I said the prototype, a lot of parts required, a lot of indigenization happened throughout, didn't happen in one day. Next slide, please. These are the ceremonies that we had. Next slide, please. This is the bulk fuel transport tank that I was talking about. I can just, I mean, any day I can vouch for this. This is highly useful in the high altitude. Maybe soon we will see a number of them here. Next slide. So my slides have finished. Now, quick points on that I have. Talking about IP, talking about a couple of things. We are trying to support a lot of startup in this country to come up and take up to speed. We had a very nice Artemis Accord recently signed. Can we do something in space? Somebody told, I think Manu said, how do we get Earth observation satellites? Looking at the assets, looking for the real-time monitoring it. Do we have to ask US every time to give that? So can we jointly develop those Earth observation satellites, many other communication satellites? Can we be really self-reliant, Atmanirbhar? I always say one thing, if you can light a fire with a lighter, don't try to lit the fire with striking two stones. Don't go primitive. Please take on that and then grow ahead. We have much more to do. We have a short time. We really need to catch up. Let's catch up and let's go ahead. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Roy Chaudhary. That was really a fantastic.
That's your 7 minutes, sir, I think.
Yeah, great for sticking to your time and for giving us a really wonderful, and it's so inspiring. And I think that's the way to go. You know, the way you guys are going, I think that's the way that we need to go, and more companies should emulate your thing. And one of the points which really struck me was your thing about skill development. I think the American companies took these skills to China. And one of the reasons why Chinese are doing it on their own in so many areas today is because they got those skills. Their workers learned those skills. Well, with that, on to our last speaker, Sucharita Bhattacharya, who's going to speak on a very intriguing subject, I think, on disinformation and how things get mixed up. So,
thank you so much. So, since morning, we have been hearing a lot about the possible or ongoing cooperation, collaboration, cross-learning, co-production between US and India. Now, all that's fine. We also understand, as Professor Mahapatra rightly mentioned, that without India, there's nothing called Indo-Pacific. We also acknowledge the fact that US and India both play a very crucial role in the Quad countries as well. Now, having said all of that, what is the next step? This, we understand, is a very happening space of cooperation, collaboration. The next step is to disseminate all that is happening, disseminate that information to the mass, to the public, right? And there comes the threat of information disorder. There are many types of information disorder. Let's restrict ourselves to misinformation and disinformation. And let me first clarify for the preference of the entire audience, what are these? Misinformation is false information without an intent to do a harm. Disinformation is misinformation with an intent to harm an individual, a collective community, or a nation. Now, when so much is happening in one space and so much of information is out there, we have, the age we are living in, we have extreme ease of access to different portals, platforms, information sharing. So we are exposed to a lot of information on a regular basis. Whether this information are authentic or not, the question is, do we check, do we do the fact checking before passing that information to a bigger crowd, to our own network? Most of the time, we don't. We become an active or passive actor in the whole nexus of information disorder. So let's understand the process, how it works. How do we decide on something, or how do we make a conclusion? How do we become judgmental about a situation? On the basis of whatever information, data, facts we have in our hand, at our disposal, right? Now, if the information available to us are unreliable, false, then whatever judgment we derive on basis of those information available to us, whatever decision we make, there is a fair chance that those decisions will be biased. That can distort the balance, and that can also be a threat to individual welfare, collective well-being, and also a threat to the national security interest. This is precisely why the information disorder is a huge concern when we are talking about security and defense partnership between the two of the largest democracies in the world, the US and the India. For the paucity of time, I'll directly refer to a couple of examples how disinformation or misinformation is creating a havoc in the space. A very recent incident is India's declaration during the visit of our Prime Minister to the state of procuring MQ-9, or the Predator drone. Now, the matter is still under consideration. A lot of negotiation is still, still needs to take place. But once there was this announcement about this particular topic being discussed among the two leaders, there was a lot of information that was flooded all over the social media, questioning India's decision whether or not we are doing it right to decide, while deciding to procure such equipment from the US, whether or not we are getting a competitive price. And this was followed accusation at a very rapid pace. When all this happened, at that point, the letter of interest was yet to be sent to the US, a letter of order and acceptance. All this is, to be when the social media and people on the social media became judgmental about this decision. A lot of negotiation about the price, and the price also about terms and conditions, about procurement process were yet to be decided. This is the threat, and this not only armed force in India, but also it can jeopardize the entire process of procurement, derail the entire process. This is one example. The other one is creating an image of your nation overseas, across the border. The scheme of Agnipath, how it was represented to the global audience through social media, was not really probably the appropriate one. Now, when such schemes are looked at in a negative light across the global audience, the image of India that has been created or curated by the leaders so far, very cautiously, that might get hampered, and that is the threat. This is one side of the story. What lies on the other side is with the increasing threat of disinformation, misinformation, or rather information disorder, now the sanction or the patrolling by the government has also increased manifold, which is again a threat because that can jeopardize the freedom of speech. And this is how exactly information disorder can threaten all the peace talks, all the collaboration, cooperation between the two countries to a great extent. So with this, I will just stop here, and we might discuss about the case studies in the next.
Thank you, Sucharita. You've really highlighted a very real problem that people and governments and institutions face in today's challenging times. However, I think there's only one antidote to that. That is, groups like yours, you should come forward, and more people, you have to take on the challenge. As you said, it's censorship is not the idea, nor is, rampant disinformation thing. So that's a big challenge. Well, for the round two now, I could listen to Air Chief Marshal all day because he's a repository of knowledge, and one has been reading the stuff he has been talking about over all these years, and some of them pretty critical. I might add, but unfortunately we have a certain time limit over here. So the next thing is about the GE 414 engines. There, I would just like to add one thing, if you could mention while you're talking about it. There's also talk about developing an engine with a higher thrust, I think 110 kiloton engine with France's CFM. So how does it augur for this this partnership that we're engaging upon with GE?
Thank you. You see, the significance of this MOU signed between HAL and GE for 414 engine, F414 engine, as well as purchase of 31 MQ-9B Predator UCAVs is what I'm going to cover now. So as far as the 414 engine is concerned, it is a very important step in terms of strategic gain that we will have towards Atmanirbharta or indigenization of engine manufacturing capability. So there's a lot on the table. But let me tell you that the DRDO, all its labs, more than 41, the HAL, the DPSU, the Bell, BDL, they've really worked very hard over the last 3 decades plus to create critical technologies which have gone into the manufacture of the LCA Tejas, like fly-by-wire technology, which is quarter redundant, which was denied to us by the US in 1998. Then, the air-to-air refueling technology, ISA radar, which is active electronically scanned array radar, SDR software-defined radio communication system, electronic warfare equipment, as also missile technology beyond visual range missiles technology like the Astra, as well as BrahMos, which are going to be fitted on the LCA. Maybe the last version of the BrahMos will be on Mark II of the LCA and AMCA. Now, right in the beginning, we suffered a setback because an engine of the rating that we wanted for the LCA, the propulsion system, could not be produced by GTRE, gas turbine, yeah, exactly, of the DRDO research establishment, and they lagged behind tremendously. And by 2008, the Kaveri engine program of the GTRE was dropped because they're lagging behind far too much, despite cost and time overrun. So HAL and the ADA, that is Aeronautical Development agency and ADE, they actually signed a contract with the GE for F404 engine as an interim measure till the time we would get the Kaveri program through. But Kaveri program did not materialize. So they bought 75 of these F404 engines from GE, and they have been delivered, and they're actually the propulsion system on the Mark 1s. And for Mark 1A, they have already placed order for 99 engines F404. So these are very capable engines, good engines. But the current contract or current agreement, which will convert into a contract once the Congress of the US, where there is bipartisan support for this agreement, will materialize, then we'll have a lot on our plate. But it's a long drawn process. Getting technology, as was mentioned by people, transfer of technology 100% may not be possible, especially in the core areas. And even if it is possible, it will take time. Secondly, they've also signed a contract for development or co-development of a prototype engine with a capacity of more than 110 kilonewtons for AMCA, Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft, that ADA and HL will co-produce. They're already at it. I think they'll succeed because we have got a very good foundation of the technologies I mentioned that they are developed for the LCA Tejas. And the same technologies will be used for the AMCA as well, with improvements, of course. And once they get the engine, the right one, it will be good. Similarly, the GTRE, which got abandoned because the Kaveri didn't succeed, they carried on with this, with a dry rating engine, which will be used in some other areas, which I do not want to mention. But they are also working with Safran company of the French for a prototype development, co-development, where IPR will not be an issue, as was mentioned earlier, for AMCA, and maybe further versions of AMCA or better aircraft in the future. So this is how futuristic development of aero engines is going to take place with two important agencies, the GE as well as Safran. I'm sure both will fructify, but with time. The challenge is, the engine is very good, F414. I must mention it has got a modular concept, and modules can be interchanged for another engine. So the downtime of the aircraft because of engine problems will be very little. And it's got the FADEC, the latest version of full authority digital engine control system, FADEC, an important component of any latest generation engine. But the area where we are going to have problems, to my mind, as was brought out by various speakers in the past, that how much of these critical technologies will get transferred to Indian partner when they jointly co-produce this engine. Of course, it is not going to be licensed production that we are very good at. HL has been doing licensed production for the last 50 years, but they have not produced a single engine so far on their own. So the critical areas in this transfer of technology would be metallurgy, the casting formulas and technologies, and the hot components, that is turbine blade, turbine status, combustion chamber, and of course, the engine compressor and status. These are the critical components. And at least in this engine, I know the technology that is used in the turbine blade, which actually is exposed to various very high temperatures and pressures, is the single crystal turbine technology, which the Americans have mastered. If we can get that, then I think there will be progress in terms of engine manufacturing being Atmanirbhar or self-sufficient. So to avoid the IPR issue, I think we'll need to co-produce, create prototype, and really get the capability. It will take maybe 5-10 years more, but in the next 15 years' time, I think we'll have something on our plate for the propulsion system of our fighter aircraft. Second aspect I'll speak if you have time is the acquisition of 31 drones or UCAVs, which we call the Predator, a very capable UCAV. But we are going to get Then for the Navy, Army, and the Air Force, total of 31. Of the FMS route, that is, foreign military sales, and it is going to be without any transfer of technology. It is buying off the shelf, make use of the capability it's got. It carries a lot of equipment in terms of electro-optical, infrared, synthetic aperture radar pods, electronic warfare, intelligence, communication equipment, etc. It also carries various types of weapon systems, which could be used by the Navy, not only to augment its military, maritime domain awareness, augment the capacity and capability of the, P-81, P-8I, MR aircraft, but also be used in anti-submarine warfare role. So the problem is that we are going to buy it off the shelf. We'll get no technologies. We'll depend on the American company for spare support, for maintenance, overall, etc., and upgrade. So this is a serious setback. To my mind, we need to have some technology sharing as well as joint venture so that our DRDO labs, which are producing these UAVs and UCAVs, get a boost. There's some other issues which I'll maybe answer during the question answer session in terms of overall implication of the Indo-US relations, especially in the military domain. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Marshal. That was very illuminating. And now if you could tell us a little bit more about your area.
Thank you, Indranil. So just taking up from what Air Marshal Raha said, these announcements have just been made made there as a statement. The work is yet to get in on these announcements. The entire procedure of technical negotiations and then commercial negotiations have to take place. And it is at this time that they will, be discussing as to what will be the indigenous content here, what will be the total value of the project coming in. And if there has to be an indigenous content, who will partner with for MQ-9Bs, and and there has to be a kind of a overall arcing framework which the defense innovation, defense industrial cooperation roadmap is going to lay down. And this is going to be very soon, because as I understand that both the governments have been working on the DIC for a long time. And it is going to be announced very shortly, maybe in a span of a month, which will be in public domain and being monitored at the apex level. Another important aspect which went on the sidelines of this was the INDEX, which we call the US-India Defense Acceleration Ecosystem, which is basically collaborating both the startups, and getting newer technologies, generating newer technology between the two startups. The problem areas in this is, both the US Embassy and the Indian government, MOD, have been working to find joint challenges for them, joint problem set, the area of how we can fund these startups to do research and development work. Also making open the universities in US and India who can work together and find and find out solution to certain common problems, common dual use problems. And another thing which they're looking at is how these technologies made, which are evolved in India, would be utilized in America. For that, we have to have standardization, certification, a similar certification system. And to have that system, you have to have quality assurance, a similar quality assurance system and standardization system. So it is a tricky issue. A lot of thought process is going on these lines. And we are interacting with the industry. Another important aspect is that we still need to make a industry to industry platform in the DIC, something which we call it Defense Industry Collaboration Forum, which was part of the DTTI. We still yet to come up. So that's a reason we do not see industry interaction on these aspects. But a very good step has been taken on the MQ-9Bs and the jet engine technology. And in case they do come through in the form that we are envisaging, this is going to give a very big boost to the small, medium, and micro industries, and entire defense ecosystem. The idea of exporting 5 billion exports from India to our neighboring countries, even to Africa and to Arab countries by 2025, which is the target set, and we are just at around 1.95 billion as of now in June. So all this can only materialize in case these technologies do come in. And as I see, and I was asking this question to G, how much time do you envisage that we could have one prototype Indian-made GE41 Ford engine feeded in? It was anybody's guesses, but not before another 10 years or so, the way things are going to be moving. But this is just to give you an overview on things. And this is a significant step for entire, in Indian industry, because in times to come, the industry is going to show a good rise. Thank you.
Thank you for adding a hopeful note to an otherwise not very inspiring landscape so far, at least. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Roy Chaudhary, you all gave a very good example about how the success story of Lockheed Martin and the Tatas. Unfortunately, these examples are few and far between in this country. Do you have any ideas on how it can be expanded and made into something really, which works over here?
So I was expecting that from you. So a quick story on that. So I went, you saw me how proud I am about our joint venture and my employees. So we have got around, I'm giving you approximate numbers, around 1,000 employees that we have in both the JVs together in the manufacturing setup we have. So I was very proud. And there was a US-India kind of a conference with all the US industries in India were invited together to sit and discuss the issues. So I very proudly went and took the front row, thought that I've done a great job. So there was Apple. They started with, how many employees do you have? He said around 15,000. I was taken, okay, forget it. IBM, 10,000. Then they went to HP, 40,000. Then they went to MasterCard, 80,000. And then the last one actually killed me, and I was like trying to find a hole somewhere to hide. It was Cognizant, 350,000 employees. So there's not less example. I think it's much more. So it is huge. And I forgot, there's Google, there is Apple, there is all others, endless. Now let's talk about defense industry, which we are discussing right now, defense aerospace. Let's talk about Raytheon with Collins Aerospace, with RTX themselves, with UTC IPL. Each one of their design lab has got 5,000 engineers working on them. Just imagine. So it's huge. And they are all the designing, whatever you see is happening in India. It's very, now what do we talk about the GE? It's a town. The GE facility is a town in itself. It's huge in Bangalore. Come and go and see what they're doing. What is the Indo-US that we are talking about? You will find it there when you go to Bangalore. Well, I know it's not in Kolkata. That's one of the challenge. But yes, Bangalore, they do have a lot. Chennai, they do have a lot. If you go, I've written Boeing facility. You go to L3 Harris facility. So many other examples. When you talk about, now we are talking about 100% technology transfer. We're just talking about it. Air Force recently bought 9 light specialist vehicles from Ashok Leyland. And guess what? That is 100% technology transfer from Lockheed Martin to Ashok Leyland in the year 2013. For that, we got no offset credit, no IP. Yes, we have a royalty. I don't want to disclose the number, but yes, we do have. So we do have a royalty for that LSV. And whatever we suggested them a Cummins engine, we suggested them a Ford mirror, everything has been indigenized. It's a Ashok Leyland engine, it's a Seat tire, it's a Motherson back glass, rear view mirror, everything 100% indigenous IC content in that facility. And it's 100% TOT from Lockheed Martin. All the drawings are ours. So that is a prime example. What you say, I can tell you some more also. Tata also has done a lot of job for us. There is a company called Saskin. Saskin gives us the software for space. More than $40 million of orders have been already placed with them in the last 10 years. It is happening. It is that it is not being promulgated correctly. When you talk about a Tata joint venture, do you think Tata is making everything of it? Every dollar that we are giving is going only to Tata? No. They have more than 80 to 100 tier ones. Each tier one, each dollar that we spend Tata out of that, 65 cents, I mean of the money is flowed down to MSMEs, SMEs, and just imagine the number of jobs that they have created. It is a multifold, it's a multiple effect. And when I go to a policymaker and I go to a government body and they say, no, we cannot do this week, I will do it next week because we are busy, I really feel annoyed. Because I cannot tell the employees of that factory to come back to take their salary after a week, 10 days, 1 month, because somebody there is busy. That's sad, but we have to understand, as I said, armed forces and the defense industry runs around the clock. Please understand the importance and the cruciality of it and act accordingly. But there is no dearth of, I can promise you that the Indo-US cooperation is going very high, very strong, very solid. It's beyond the McDonald's. So I think let's enjoy that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rohit Chaudhary. I'm glad that I sit corrected. And with that, final questions for Sucharita. So you highlighted the challenge about disinformation. So can you give us a few ideas on how you think it could be countered?
Yeah, so many stories being discussed and so much of, I would call tsunami of data being discussed. The domain I come from, I was just trying to imagine how much of distorted information can be curated out of all this discussion if we do not come up with a proper strategy. So yeah, I had highlighted the challenges of information disorder. Now let me also talk about something positive, something constructive. Now, let us first understand, like, if we really want to counter the information disorder, we need to understand and identify the cycle, how it operates, how it is created, how it is recreated, and how it is disseminated. And who are the key players, who are the key actors, what are the key elements when we are talking about disinformation, misinformation. Now, the cycle of distorted information can only be countered with a strategy for circulating only and only authentic information. How can that happen? That can happen through engagement, information, like engaging, informing, and influencing your audience in a constructive manner. In this context, I would like to highlight that media is often mentioned as the fourth vertical of democracy. So what about better integration of media in a very responsible, quick responsive, and accountable manner while sharing the information with a bigger audience, with the bigger crowd, with the mass? Now, when I'm talking about media, I'm also indicating at social media, digital media, and there comes the whole concept of digital diplomacy and political communication, the way it is evolving in today's time. I would just cite few examples. For example, Nigeria, which could restore its democracy way back in 1999. If we look at their election in 2015, digital diplomacy or digital communication in form of Twitter diplomacy played a big role in ensuring fairness of election because of the power of immediacy that it implies. Another example is how you as a nation can create your brand or image in front of the whole world using social media or digital diplomacy and different tools and techniques. We have been talking about a number of technical or technology cooperation between the US and India, and I see a lot of potential. I am very hopeful that we were talking about critical and emerging technology. These technologies can be well integrated to build the capacity of the media professionals who are the front runners when it comes to sharing information with the bigger crowd. Another example was when in the initial time of digitalization of diplomacy in India, our diplomat Ms. Nirupama Rao had made use of Twitter while evacuating Indians from Libya during the civil war. How she made use of Twitter, that was one of its first kind. So there are plenty of examples. Now, how we can mainstream all these examples, how we can integrate these examples more into the to this happening space is something we need to look into. And there also comes the role of civil society organizations or think tanks like Cuts International. And I'm glad to mention that we have been making certain interventions in this space. For example, with the support from US Consulate Kolkata, we have been doing this capacity building or training workshops for media professionals, not only from India, but also from several other countries in the Indo-Pacific, wherein we are trying to make them equipped with tools and techniques, state-of-art technology, which are readily available and which they can resort to while doing fact check or while debunking misinformation, disinformation before passing on the information to their respective crowd or respective audience. Not only capacity building, I would also say that bringing this media professionals from different countries from across border connected over a common platform. It can be as basic as a WhatsApp group where facts can be checked immediately. So we have done that as well, and we have seen tangible outcomes as well. So all these are initiatives which can be scaled up as and when more civil society organizations, more non-state actors along with the state actors come forward and start doing such initiatives. So there's a lot of hope as well.
Thank you, Sucharita. So I think that's about it. And we don't have any much, we just have about 7 minutes left. So I will ask one question before anybody else does. And yeah, I will ask one question. And before I ask the question, I think one point, yes, sir. Yes, I'll just, but before I ask the question, one point I'd like to make is that, you know, I think it's so important for people outside, which I said in the beginning, but which I am again emphasizing to people outside New Delhi to engage in this dialogue, in this debate and, you know, discussion and in disseminating information. I think that is absolutely critical for the health, not just for Indo-US defense ties, but generally critical for the health of our nation. I mean, why? See, you know, in the United States, the RAND Corporation, which plays a very critical role in providing inputs for strategic decision-making in Washington, is based in LA. You know, it's not there in Washington. So, I mean, we don't have anything similar in India. So maybe people.
If I may come in here, because I wanted to highlight, due to paucity of time, I didn't. You talk about moving beyond Delhi, moving beyond metropolitans, right? And the initiative that I was mentioning, capacity building of the media profession, and we are doing exactly this thing. We are going to the remote pockets, especially Eastern and Northeastern, which are strategically very important locations, going for capacity building workshops for the local media houses so that they are well equipped with the tools and techniques.
I think that's a great thing which you're doing. And I think much more of this needs to be done in other parts of the country as well. So my question is to all of you distinguished participants who've spoken a lot and given us a lot of ideas is, see, partnership is not a one-way process, right? Now in India, we tend to focus on what are we getting from this relationship? What are we getting from the US? What are we getting from these guys? Perhaps I don't hear that much in this debate or discussion on what are we giving? Or are there any expectations about us on any specifics apart from, you know, the larger strategic kind of support for US policies in the region? So that would be my question. Very quick, maybe 30 seconds, one comment each from everybody.
One word.
One word.
One word. Cost margin. Savings.
Okay, that's
giving me.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Second, quality.
So these are the hard facts, but yes, there are Indian companies who are now venturing out to invest in US. VVK LLPs are investing $1.5 billion in US for manufacturing vertically placed solar panels under the energy scheme. We also have Epsilon Carbon Limited of India investing around 650 million US dollars in a greenfield project of making EV batteries there. So it is two ways, not one way.
Thank you. Just two quick questions from the gentleman at the back and from Mr. Chan. Just one question.
Yeah, I'm Captain Sanyal from Navy, but more than that, I'm a proud Indian and really delighted to hear the kind of progress that we have made, especially as Colonel Baljinder Singh has said. Concerns expressed by Air Chief Marshal is very genuine, and the success story by Mr. Roy Chaudhary is also very heartening. And I'll start with it, but these are all very serious issues, which I'm sure we have the capability and the competent authorities are addressing on both sides, from India and US. But I have, as a very ordinary citizen, I have one question, and I start that with a disclaimer to our lady panelist that this is not an information disorder. I am asking, taking cue from what Colonel Baljinder Singh said, that one of the aspects is travel and tourism. So it's concerning that. So now if we are engaging so much with the US to improve cooperation, now applying for an US visa, it takes 400 days on record just to get a date for interview. So how is that going to encourage travel and tourism? My request is to the forum, if they can take up this issue with the appropriate authorities, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's an issue. And thank you for your question. And with that, we conclude this session. And we have no more time. And thanks once again to everyone for their wonderful speeches.
Thank you for a very expressive panel discussion. Now I would like to ask Deepmala to present mementos, first to the chair and moderator, Indranil Banerjee. Next, to Air Marshal Arup. Also, you can. Next, memento to Colonel Baljinder Singh. Deepmala, the next moment to Pata Roy Chaudhary. Thank you for your second presentation and remarks. And on time. So we are on time. Thank you again. A loud round of applause for finishing on time as well. Thank you. All right. With this, now I would like to call upon Adrian Pratt, is Acting Director of the American Center, Kolkata, and Public Affairs Officer of the US Consulate General in Kolkata, to give his closing remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am delighted to be here. I'm sorry I couldn't make it here earlier, but I had the distinct pleasure of picking up from the airport our new director of the American Center, Elizabeth Lee, who arrived this morning and came straight here to be part of this panel. So congratulations to her, and welcome to Kolkata. I will begin just by addressing our Navy friend and proud Indian. We hear your concerns loudly and clearly. It's a frustration we share with you. Our new ambassador has been here for a couple of months. This issue was raised at the White House during the recent visit of your Prime Minister to the United States. And Ambassador Garcetti has said this is one of his top priorities to get this situation fixed. You're absolutely right. We can talk about tourism all we want, but if it takes people a long time to get a visa, then we have issues to work on. So please understand that it's top priority. With that also, I acknowledge that speaking now, I will probably be touching on some of the issues that this very distinguished panel touched on earlier. I really enjoyed that conversation and the sharing of that information. So I hope you're all still with me. I know I am the last thing between you and lunch. So I will proceed now, and hopefully we can make it to lunchtime. It really is an honor for me to speak to you today as we, along with CUTS International, initiate the series of virtual sessions of one of our key this partnership. And really, what a great time for us to be telling these moving and important stories of the US-India relationship. As I just mentioned, in June, President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Narendra Modi affirmed a vision of the United States and India as amongst the closest partners in the world, a partnership of democracies looking into the 21st century with hope, ambition, and confidence. The US-India comprehensive global and strategic partnership is anchored in a new level of trust and mutual understanding and enriched by the warm bonds of family and friendship that inextricably link our countries together. As the world's oldest democracies, our countries always have something to learn from each other as well. Our people-to-people ties are at the heart of our constructive partnership. Although we are based in Kolkata, our consular district is vast and diverse, with 5 international borders, and engagement by the US consulate reaches the remote corners of the region that includes 11 states across East and Northeast India. As Sucharita just mentioned, we did a program together in Nagaland. Our work includes preventing trafficking in persons, promoting women's entrepreneurship, supporting minority rights, promoting US higher education, providing English language and leadership programs for youth through English access, and forging trade, economic, security, and cultural connections in the Indo-Pacific region. The Indo-Pacific region is crucial to US foreign policy objectives. Secretary Blinken said, and quote, "The Indo-Pacific region will shape the trajectory of the world in the 21st century. It is the fastest growing region on the planet. The United States recognizes that much of our planet's future will be written in the Indo-Pacific. Our enduring commitment to this region and our collaboration with our allies and partners will help us to achieve a free and open, interconnected, prosperous, resilient, and secure region for all," end quote. And India is our strong ally in the Indo-Pacific and the Quad. President Biden and Prime Minister Modi recommitted themselves to empowering the Quad as a partnership for global good. The two leaders welcomed the progress made at the Hiroshima summit in May among the 4 maritime democracies to further advance a positive and constructive agenda for peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. The leaders welcomed progress on the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness, through which Quad partners are providing maritime domain data across the Indian Ocean, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific regions. The Quad, to be hosted in India in 2024, would be another opportunity to continue the dialogue and consolidate cooperation. The leaders committed to continue working in partnership with regional platforms such as the Indian Ocean Rim Association, Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, and ASEAN to achieve shared aspirations and address shared challenges in the Indo-Pacific region. The US and India reiterated their enduring commitment to a free, open, inclusive, peaceful, and prosperous India-Pacific region with respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty and international law. The US-India major defense partnership has emerged as a pillar of global peace and security. Through joint exercises, strengthening of defense industrial cooperation, the annual 2+2 ministerial dialogue, and other consultative mechanisms, we have made substantial progress in building an advanced and comprehensive defense partnership in which our militaries coordinate closely across all domains. We appreciate the strong military-to-military ties, mutual logistics support, and efforts to streamline implementation of foundational agreements. Information sharing and placement of liaison officers in each other's military organizations will spur joint service cooperation. The US and India reiterated their resolve to strengthen maritime security cooperation, including through enhanced underwater domain awareness. The leaders welcomed the launch of dialogues in new defense domains, including space and AI, which will enhance capacity building, knowledge, and expertise. Expressing desire to accelerate defense industrial cooperation, which we've just been talking about, the US and India have welcomed the adoption of a defense industrial cooperation roadmap, which will provide policy direction to defense industries and enable co-production of advanced defense systems and collaborative research, testing and prototyping of projects. President Biden and Prime Minister Modi hailed the landmark signing of an MOU between General Electric and Hindustan Aeronautics Limited for the manufacture of GE F-414 jet engines in India for the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited Light Combat Aircraft Mk2. This trailblazing initiative to manufacture F-414 engines in India will enable greater transfer of US jet engine technology than ever before. The leaders committed their government to working collaboratively and expeditiously to support the advancement of this unprecedented co-production and technology transfer. President Biden and Prime Minister Modi also welcomed India's emergence as a hub for maintenance and repair for forward deployed US Navy assets and the conclusion of master ship repair agreements with Indian shipyards. This will allow the US Navy to expedite the contracting process for mid-voyage and emergent repair. As envisaged in the Defense Industrial Roadmap, both countries agreed to work together for the creation of logistics, repair, and maintenance infrastructure for aircraft and vessels in India. The leaders welcomed the setting up and launch of the US-India Defense Acceleration Ecosystem, IndusX, as a network of universities, startups, industry, and think tanks. IndusX will facilitate joint defense technology innovation and co-production of advanced defense technology between the respective industries of the two countries, as Colonel Singh was talking about earlier. The US Department of Defense's Space Force has signed its first international cooperative research and development agreement with Indian startup 114 AI and Third Eye Tech. Both companies will work with General Atomics to co-develop components using cutting-edge technologies in AI and semiconductors, respectively. President Biden and Prime Minister Modi welcomed India's plans to procure General Atomics MQ-9B HALE UAVs. The MQ-9Bs, which will be assembled in India, will enhance the ISR capabilities of India's armed forces across domains. As part of this plan, General Atomics will establish a comprehensive global MRO facility in India to support India's long-term goals to boost indigenous defense capabilities. Cooperation with India strengthens our security, bolsters our prosperity, and enriches our society. An enormous range of Americans have a stake in the US-India relationship and expect further progress in achieving the full potential of US-India defense ties as it spans the scope of human endeavor, from sea to space, from security to health, and from energy to education. These are all important stories, and through this project with our partner CUTS International, we want to tell these stories to the citizens of India and beyond. We are kicking off the first of the series of these workshops in Kolkata, and we will schedule workshops in Hyderabad, Mumbai, Chennai, and finally in New Delhi that will bring in defense experts, government officials, corporate leaders, defense companies, entrepreneurs, and researchers from the US and India to interact with think tank leaders, journalists, digital storytellers, and social media influence across India. We want to tell you that managing our defense and law enforcement activities keeps all our citizens, young and old, female and male, regardless of religion or political party, safe from crime, reduces the risks from terrorism, and protects us from the threat of war. As we're hearing today, this is an extraordinarily exciting time for us to be working on this bilateral relationship, which, as President Biden has referred to as the most consequential relationship in the 21st century. So I thank all of you. I thank CUTS International for kicking this off here in Kolkata, and I really appreciate everyone's participations. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian Pratt. With this, I would like to also welcome Elizabeth Lee. Welcome to City of Joy, Kolkata. I would request Vipul Chattopadhyay to please present the memento and welcome Adrian Pratt.
Yes.
All right. Now I would like to call upon Elizabeth Lee. And Deepal, I would request you to present the memento. If you could come this way. Since it's your first day, welcome to the City of Joy.
Only been on the ground for 3 hours now, so.
Welcome. With this, now I would like to call upon Arnab Ganguly. He's Associate Director, Cuts International, for his closing remarks and also concluding today's event. Thank you.
Thank you, Puru. Thanks, Adrian and Ms. Lee. Adrian is now the Acting Consul General and the Director of American Center. And soon Ms. Lee is going to take over as the Director of the American Center. So happy to have you both here today with us. So, you know, I have the privilege of being the last man standing between you and the lunch. And I can assure you, I'm not going to misuse that privilege. So I'm going to be very short. You know, I just want to mention some of the key takeaways that we had from today's this workshop, this dialogue, I would say. So first of all, I mean, we are in the Indo-Pacific, we are representing 40% of the world's GDP and 60% of the global population. So that itself is, you know, speaks volumes about the significance of Indo-Pacific. Now, Indo-Pacific, to be peaceful, to be resilient, to be stable, it's extremely important that all the members, especially India and the US, should, you know, have strong bilateral ties. And these bilateral ties should not be only limited to strategic and economic areas, but this should also be extended to other areas like the cultural areas, which can actually help build people-to-people connectivity. And that in turn can address one of the crucial issues that came up again and again, which is the lack of, you know, the issue of trust deficit which came up, you know, during the deliberation. So it's extremely important that we, you know, have those trust. And one of the important points that was made by Lieutenant General Saha is, you know, indecision should not be an excuse for delayed implementation of bilateral ties, of agreements. If there are indecisions, if there are areas of question, we should sort it out with, you know, dialogues, you know, proactive dialogues, which should be G2G and also, you know, B2B. Now, you know, the other important point that, you know, I would like to mention is, you know, to have trust between countries, it's extremely important that extremely important that we ensure free flow of correct information across borders. And that's where the role of media plays a very, very pivotal role. We have been trying to, you know, build cross-border collaboration of journalists. But what we also feel that often the media is kept outside the ambit of many of the deliberations that are happening. For example, you know, we are talking about Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, but we don't have a pillar for Media Connect. That's, I think, is extremely important to ensure that correct information flows. Also, what we have often seen is, you know, often when the stories, you know, what happens is when the media is not there, either they are hearing from someone else, and where personal biases plays an important role. So that has to be kept aside, and it's really challenging for, you know, the media people to actually set off those biases and actually deliver the as-is news to the people. Lastly, you know, it's sorry, it's extremely important that, you know, this the objective of this dialogue is to also inform the media about the US-India relations, the defense ties that are what is, you know, what it's present and where it is heading to, the various aspects of it, delivering the facts to all the journalist friends, to the media fraternity. And this is just the first of our workshops. Our next workshop will be in Jaipur, followed by other in Chennai and other parts of India. With this, let me conclude this and thank the US Embassy in New Delhi, the US Department of State, and the US Consulate General Kolkata for supporting us in this initiative. I will also take the opportunity on behalf of the consortium to thank all of our speakers, our chairs, our moderators, our participants from the media fraternity who have taken time to come here, interact with all of us and enrich us with their information, with their thoughts, with their questions, suggestions, and all that. With this, thank you. Lunch has been served. Request everyone to please join us for lunch. Thank you. And last but not the least, I would like to thank all my colleagues at CUTS who have made this possible. Thanks.